Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode number 226. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my son, Chris Raygun. Chris, how is this cruel and unusual world treating you today, my friend?
Not too bad. My voice feels a little messy because I'm in the middle of making a video about Bayonetta, and there's a thing where I have to scream, and I think I overdid it last night at like 12 in the morning, screaming into my microphone, which I'm sure my neighbors appreciated. But
yeah, they probably love that.
Yeah, well, they didn't say anything, so I assume it's fine.
Fuck them. Who cares? This world's all going to shit anyway. You might as well scream into a microphone. It's the least you can do.
Exactly.
Dustin Furman, executive producer of Last Stand. How are you today, my friend? Nice shirt, looking good,
Thank you.
Looking fit. I'm not a long sleeve shirt guy personally.
Yeah.
I feel even when I wear I always wore button downs, especially at IGN, and people used to think I would roll up my sleeves to show my tattoos, but I'd actually roll up my sleeves because I hated having sleeves, and my arms I have little, well, not so much anymore, but I had a little girl arm. So if you had the short sleeve shirt, it was like a stick coming out, so you didn't want that either. You wanted that tight fit.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about. How are you today, my friend?
I'm fantastic. I brought something for a little show and tell. We were talking off camera. We were talking about how I got to see Iron Maiden a few days ago in DC, which is great. It's like my family's band. It's been my family's band my entire life. And I was in basically the very front, which was great. And I caught this wristband from the guitar player. And this is now a new Furman sacred artifact.
Yeah, it's a relic.
I was thinking, should I get like an acrylic box for it to protect the
How much
Dave
do you care
Murray?
about? How much do you care about it? I mean,
this is important. This is one of the greatest metal guitarists, maybe one of the greatest guitarists of all time.
I would do it. Yeah, get a little like how people put, you catch a baseball and you put it in the little plastic thing. You can do that same thing probably.
And those would be way more common than these, because he throws out like maybe 3 of these a night on tour.
Right.
So I don't. That's something to consider. But
yeah,
it was a great time. Cool. And I'm doing good today. I chugged an entire coffee right before we started. So will I have to pee in the middle? Last time I said I would, didn't happen. Inconsistent urinary tract, I guess.
Yeah, we're getting deep into your medical records here.
Well,
are you going to release your medical records?
If I have to, the Sacred Symbols medical records.
Yeah.
For each host.
You don't want to see my medical records. Can you imagine?
I wouldn't even know what the first step to even acquiring those would be, to be honest with you. Like, I like, if somebody was like, hey, get your medical records, I don't know what my first step would be, because I haven't been to the doctor in like a century, it feels like. Like, I'm just like, I feel fine, generally,
Right.
I'll go when I'm.
And if you feel bad, don't go either. I mean, who cares?
Every now and again, my brain like stings, and then I wake up 3 days later. But like, I'm sure that's fine.
You'll be okay, my friend. Don't worry about that.
I'm sure it's not a big deal.
Quacks. All right, welcome to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. We go live each and every week. You can get it 3 days early and ad-free over on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. More than 12,000 of you over there. We very much appreciate you. Couldn't do without your kindness and support. Of course, you can join our Discord by joining on Patreon. Submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. Of course, the early ad-free access, name in the credits, and all the rest. We really appreciate it. Q&As and so on and so forth. Recent Sacred Symbols Plus episodes, so that's the big perk, twice a week over on Patreon. Supplemental episodes. We just did Sacred Symbols Cross Defining Duke again. That was a really fun episode, although rife with technical issues. Not that you would know, but for us on our end, it was fucking annoying. So we got that out of there. Sacred Sales Saga is almost ready to go. I'm really excited about this. I've been crunching the numbers, really putting my mind into it in some way, trying to create something cool. We'll have more on that soon. Gene Park from the Washington Post, our buddy, was just on the show. We did an episode all about the fall of G4, and we introduced the Sacred League, which is our kind of fantasy style thing that we're doing. And we did some call-ins with Chris and me and Dustin. So lots of things going on over there. We very much appreciate you. course, merch, laststandmedia.store, new merch, beanies / toques or toques, depending on where you are. You know, if you're Canadian or a few of you up there, apparently. I'm not really into it personally. I'm not into a lot of things that are going on in Canada, to be perfectly honest with you. A lot of chicanery going on up there. The home of hockey, though, my favorite sport, so you can't hate on it too much. We ship internationally, free domestic shipping on all stickers, and one of those stickers Nixie wrote in about said, "Howdy, Seamen and D-Boy. I've been enjoying the excellent Moriarty Raygun 24 bumper sticker from your merch shop, and it got me wondering. Colin is clearly president and commander-in-chief of the Gamer Battalion. Micah would be first lady, and Chris is vice president. But what roles in the Moriarty regime would the other LSM members fill? Thanks for the consistently excellent content and continue caressing that chicken." Thank you for writing in. I want to be very clear. Once I get into office, I'm never leaving. And it's going to be a dynastic but benevolent totalitarian dictatorship from that point forward. So think a little bit like North Korea, but not nearly as bad. That's kind of what we're going to try to do here. So frankly, they're all puppets on strings as far as I'm concerned. They can be whatever they want.
Still bad, but not nearly as bad.
Right, bad.
Yeah.
Bad.
But not as.
But not that bad. You're not going to be eating tree bark tea.
Right.
You know, like they do over there. It's not going to be that
Unless
bad.
you want to. Yeah.
This is America. So you're free to do whatever it is you want to do. But so don't worry about what everyone else's positions are. Just worry about how we're going to get in office. Yeah,
I like to think that at least, like, man, I feel like Maddie would be a good, you know, when George Bush was reading that book during 9/11 and the guy came up to him and whispered into him, "Hey, 9/11 is happening."
Yeah.
I don't think that's what he said. But I feel like Maddie would be that guy.
9/11 is happening. That's what he said right in his ear.
And he turns and he says, "Yes, that's correct."
Just so you know.
Wow.
He would be good at that. And that was so weird just because he kept reading.
He did. I mean, you know, it's a really engaging story, I think. Whatever it was.
I just want to know how it ends.
I think it was like a children's book, right? Like, oh, I wonder what color the green eggs and ham are this time.
You're right.
I don't know what the hell that book could have possibly been.
He was very intrigued by whatever was going on. I think the idea was that they didn't want to scare the kids in the classroom, but my whole thing is like, dude, we're having an international crisis right now. Who cares? Get the hell out of there. Are you nuts?
Turn on the TV. Make them watch it.
Bozo.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Bozo. That's my favorite thing on the when I read that on the internet. I love that. All right. Finally, Eclipse channel. How's it doing, Dustin? Are you pleased or?
It's interesting just because some clips I've noticed have snagged the algorithm and others haven't. See, Colin, last time I brought this up, I got slightly accused of cheating, but the thing about the YouTube algorithm is it works on minutes watched, not by views. So we have a lot of. I'm wondering if we have a lot of people that watch the whole episode, subscribed, and then only watch a few minutes because they're already fans of the show. And if could that be hurting the videos? Is it because they're bad? Maybe we just suck. Maybe individual clips suck. But no, it's been good overall. But if you click it, watch all of it.
What is it? Tiny? Do we have a tiny URL for it?
We do. tinyurl.com/sacred clips.
Yeah, sacred clips. tinyurl.com/sacred clips. If the episodes or if the normal episodes are too overwhelming for you, if you don't have the courage and the gumption to stick with us here, and I'd like to see more reviews on iTunes, Spotify, and all of that. Can I see that, please?
Yeah.
Nice reviews, good reviews. We don't ask you for that very often, but it helps us algorithmically find new audiences, and so we very much appreciate that. All right, I've asked you for enough. That's the end. Now it's time for our monthly telethon, where we ask you for even more now. Let's do it. I need you to leave 2 reviews from different accounts. 2 iTunes reviews, 2 Spotify reviews, all those kinds of things.
We're not above cheating.
All right. Let's see here. Topics of discussion. You guys disappointed me last week. We didn't have too much to stretch our legs with. I think we have a lot more this week. And let's start with David Whitby. He wrote in and said, "Greetings, sacred slitties. Is Chris aware that Europe is a continent made of many countries? I only ask as when Chris answered the question why it's always the Europeans last week. He said, their queen just died. The UK isn't Europe, dude. You're better than that. Not angry, just disappointed. Keep up the great work. I love all things sacred symbols." Chris?
Yeah, I love eroding the individuality of all those countries in that way. I like it. I like imagining the Queen of England as the Queen of Europe because it's very funny.
Right. Yeah, I just think Europeans, they overthink what we think about them. You know?
Yeah.
You're over there. Aware. You're fine. You're doing whatever you're doing. I don't think about it, to be perfectly honest, very much.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I know Italy isn't part of the UK. but it's very fucking funny to me to imagine. I mean, it's all right. Like, it's not that funny because it's a dead queen. You know, I understand, right? But it's it's vaguely amusing to imagine that, like, the entirety of Europe, like, because they owned everything at one point. Like, the UK, like, that dynasty is hilariously underpowered now. It's like a weapon that got nerfed into the ground that nobody uses anymore. It's like, man, and then like she dies, and then it's like it doesn't really matter. They have to reprint all their money. You know that?
Oh, is that true? Do they really have to do that to have Prince or King?
I don't know. I heard this from somebody who I trust.
Well, I assume the new money will not have her on it anymore. But how are they going to get all that other money off that?
I assume it's like they're going to all the money that they have that is not out of circulation. They're probably going to reprint or whatever. Because, right. But then that's so bizarre to me that you would have to have an alive person on your money.
Yeah, you got to put a dead person on your money from the get-go.
Yeah, they all have to be. Yeah, I mean, that is wise, to be fair. Like, you have to. Not a good idea to put alive people on your money, you know, because alive people can mess up still. You know, you don't want to have like a situation where it's like, oh, hey, Bill Cosby is on the dollar because he's America's dad. And then like, whoops.
Dude, yeah, I wish we could vote on who was on the money.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
You know how some cities allow you to vote for like the names of the plows or the names of the buses or something, and they name them like, you know, Bussy, yeah, like Buckface and all that kind of stupid shit.
Yeah.
We could probably get the best people on the money if we voted. Just the fucking most hilarious people. Yeah. Imaginable. And what I love what we do in America is we're a little lazy. Everyone we worship in a civic way, with rare exception, are all so old that we've not even bothered to like, I would argue the last truly notable, like, renowned, beloved, universal American was FDR.
Yes. That's very true.
And that was just forced on everyone, right? We didn't want necessarily that to happen. It's just the Depression in World War II. It's like, all right, well, this is our guy. You know, this is our guy. But yeah, we're so lazy that we're like, no, everyone that was in the revolution, we like them the most. And we're just going to put them on everything. And so it gives you very little to think about. We don't have to think about it.
Who would be on the $20 bill in Colin Moriarty's America?
Maury Povich.
Okay, that's an amazingly quick answer. Why is Maury on your mind that quickly? That's like a really that's a quick pull for Maury.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. It's because Micah and I were kidding around about how funny it would be if we had a son and named him Maury Moriarty, and then we were kind of like, we kind of dig that, and so it's like just the alliteration, Maury Moriarty. That's why it was on. That's why he was on my mind. He's also a great American. You know what we were talking about with Maury Povich? We've been watching a lot of the Maury Povich "You're Not the Father" clips, which are just endless on YouTube. Yeah, once you start watching them, it just feeds you an endless array of them, and they're hysterical. But my favorite thing about Maury Povich, and this is the thing that Maury Povich is and I mean this straight up, is a stage craftsman. No matter what is going on that stage, what is being said, he is dead serious. Yeah. And and he knows that it's funny and it adds to the comedy. And I think it is just absolutely brilliant. Dude, we were dying. We were watching a clip where the baby that they were doing the DNA test was named Tater Tot. Straight up. The baby's name was Tater Tot. And he would say with a straight affect, "Are you going to be in Tater Tot's life?" You know, and all this kind of stuff. And like the camera's all tight in on him or whatever. And he's just, I'm like, this is the performance of the ages, dude. Maury Povich. Yeah. And also the way he gives every dude, like, you know, a lot of black guys, a lot of Hispanic guys, some white guys, but a lot of guys coming on doing pounds and giving all these kind of, and he knows every one of the handshakes, right? Like no matter what's going on, like he understands what he's supposed to, I'm mesmerized by Maury Povich.
He's a mesmerizing presence.
That answers the question for you.
Absolutely.
I'm writing this down so I can remember to bring this up in the possible write up for the show. Okay. What were we talking about? Oh, the UK. Dustin, you have anything to add about Europe?
So I saw some feedback from the comments talking about what Chris had said, and I just find it interesting how I don't know if they don't teach geography in the UK. You know, a lot of them saying they're not European because they're not part of the EU. And I said, no, the UK is part of the continent of Europe.
Yeah, that's not what European means.
You are European. Just because you're not part of the EU doesn't mean you're not European.
And let's also be clear, a lot of you like being called European. What do you think? I forgot? It wasn't, Brexit wasn't that long ago. You know?
It's true.
I understand. You can't just be an island unto yourself, literally and figuratively. Right. You know, you have to be part of some landmass. This is what I'm troubled by Greenland specifically. I'm like, what is this thing?
What are you?
Are you? Iceland is decidedly Europe. I've been to Iceland. It's Europe. Greenland? I don't know what the fuck that is. It's kind of like North America. It's a little closer to North America, but it was claimed, I think it's run by Norway or something. I don't know.
Greenland is like, you know when you get that message that's like return to battlefield? That's what Greenland is. Like, I don't think
you're afraid the game's going to throw you back to the checkpoint?
It's just like, it's not like we haven't finished this part yet. We haven't figured out exactly what this is, so you don't go here because we haven't figured it out either.
I love that.
Greenland, figure out what you do.
Yeah, we need more information.
Do you remember when Trump tried to buy Greenland?
Yes. I got to tell you that I think that was a pretty canny move. It's very similar to Alaska. That was called Seward's Folly when it happened because the Secretary of State, Seward, was the one that negotiated it, and everyone's like, "What the fuck are we supposed to do with this shit?" You know? and then decades later, it's like, "Oh, it's full of oil and gold." And with Greenland, you know what it's full of?
Green
water.
Oh, for the water wars.
Yes.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Someone told me that there was like a graphic novel about how the United States invades Canada in the near future to take their water. Do you know what I'm talking about? Huh?
I said, what a dream.
Well, we tried once and it didn't work out very well.
You
know, 1812, 1814. You know, I think we sack Ottawa. What do? They come back and they burn Washington, D.C. to the ground. Not a good look.
Unbelievable.
Not a good look. Crazy. The original National Archives, gone. You sons of bitches. How dare you? What are we talking about? I am so confused right now about what we're talking about. Let's move on.
Yeah, this is what Europe does. Let's move on.
It's exactly right. It's been muddling everything up for time immemorial. That's the whole point. All right. Jake Zielsdorf wrote in and said, "What is the best Halloween song?" There's only one answer. It's Oingo Boingo's Dead Man's Party.
No.
Absolutely.
So Chris agrees. Dead Man's Party. I mean, Oingo Boingo's Dead Man's Party is the essential.
It's between that and pretty much anything, in my opinion, from Nightmare Before Christmas, because that movie is immaculate. But that's also like a half Christmas movie, you know? So
it's
like
also the same person. You know?
That's true. That is true.
Because it's Danny Elfman.
Danny Elfman owns Halloween.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
He apparently, I don't know very much about it, but he's like apparently like an incredible compositional wizard.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I don't know, because I like Oingo Boingo, I like New Wave, so, and I know about a lot of his scoring, but he's apparently incredibly well respected, which is so funny when you consider Oingo Boingo.
Yeah, I think he did like Spider-Man, and I know he did Spider-Man, but I think he did Gremlins as well. Just like all these like weird, like off the beaten path kind of scores for films. I think Batman 1989 as well. Dude's been around,
but in a good way.
Anyway, Dustin, you disagree?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know. I'm partial to Monster Mash. It's just classic. Oh, yeah. It's fun. It's good for everybody. You know.
Monster.
Yeah. Is it bad that, Colin, you said Oingo Boingo, and instantly they're characters in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Oingo and Boingo.
Oh, really?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's your reference to Oingo Boingo.
That's my reference, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's awesome, though. I love that.
That's scary. Yeah, Oingo Boingo is an awesome new wave band. You might like him. I don't know how you feel about new wave, but I love it.
That reminds me of in Dragon Ball when it was Bibbidi, Bobbidi, and Boo.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love when they do that. It's cute.
My favorite, Flotsam and Jetsam.
That's a good one.
From Little Mermaid. Always loved them. One had like a fucked up eye or something. Always loved the enemies. Why are we so drawn to them? I think we've talked about that in the past. By the way, quick postscript. Best Christmas song? The Waitresses' Christmas Wrapping. Not even close. I don't want to hear
know what that is.
Oh my God, dude. That song is so... You would know it if you heard it. And that song, first of all, has one of the gnarliest bass lines I've ever heard in my life and is so good. And what's sad is the woman who sang it, the band's called The Waitresses. She died of lung cancer like when she was like 30 or something crazy like that.
Oh, well,
And so like this is, and I find shit like that really eerie when I listen to songs like that. There's a song by a band called School of Fish from the early 90s that I really like called 3 Strange Days. And that guy died of like stomach cancer when he was like in his early 30s. And some of them went on to play in other bands. But I find that very eerie when I listen to those songs because it's like the person captured at their peak and never again, if that makes any sense. And so I think about that with that particular song, but that's a jam. We'll save that topic. I don't want to be like Target and get two holidays ahead here.
Yeah. Let's not get. Yeah.
They're already selling like Valentine's Day shit, you know?
Oh my God.
I was told not that I want any Halloween decorations, but I was told that if you wanted them at this point, like they're not, it's too bad.
Yeah.
You know?
You just have to kill a person and just like splay them on your doorstep. And then it's just like, hey, this is a decoration kind of.
Right. Now I live in a very vibrant neighborhood. Lots of kids around here. But
I thought you were going to say violent.
Violent. No, it's not violent at all. Thank God. I've lived in some violent neighborhoods. This is not one of them.
Yeah.
And, but I put out the dogs kind of freak out when people come to the door for Halloween. So I just put out a sign in the little candy bowl. We'll see what happens. Yeah. No one's stolen the bowl yet, which I appreciate. All right. Anthony wrote in and said, hello there. Couple of notes. It would seem Colin's moved the bottle of pledge just one shelf. He's now just playing God and abusing his powers. With this, it would seem. So I can't see. We're using Riverside instead of Zencaster, so we have a more portrait style thing where I can't see the full shelf. But it is true that I moved the bottle of pledge. But I don't know if the guys can't see it because of the shot we have now. But I've actually started adding things to the shelf. I think you'll note that there is what is it? Symphony of the Night, my Symphony of the Night vinyl. So you can see Richter and Maria. I have my Nino Cooney collector's edition unopened from PS3 back there. I'm getting things done, and I'll tell you what happened. My dad came and visited. He stays with me when he comes to visit. He likes to see the grandkids. And so I was kind of in a holding pattern where I couldn't do any work or play any games. But he was like around, and I was waiting for him to come over or whatever. And then so I just started cleaning the office. So next time he comes and visits, whenever that will be, maybe I'll do some more work on it.
Yeah.
Sutter Kane wrote in and said, Colin, is Mike McDaniel coach of the Miami Dolphins, Chris's long-lost brother? They look eerily similar. Please discuss. Chris, you've certainly been told this, right? That you look like this guy?
I've been told like I look like everybody that has short, dark hair and glasses and isn't African-American. So, you know, like I'm sure I've gotten this at one point, but it fades in the sea of comparisons that I get inundated. I've gotten Daniel Radcliffe, Andy Samberg, fucking what's his Daniel Radcliffe. I don't know, like I know it makes no goddamn sense. Like it's all just fucking nonsense. I remember this though reminded me, this unlocked a core memory though, a couple years ago. Somebody sent me this photo on Twitter, or I think it was like some social media platform, and they were like, "Hey, were you in Germany?" And they send me a picture of this guy on his computer in like an airport in Germany. And I thought it was me. It was very, very, very eerie. So somewhere in Europe, there is somebody who looks exactly like suspiciously like me. It's like very scary. Because I was even thinking like, it got to the point where I was like, was I?
Was I in Germany?
Like, is it possible that I forgot that I went to Germany? I was like, no way. Like, because it really did look that. It wasn't. He was dressed very similarly too. And it was just like, it was very eerie. So that the concept of doppelgangers is absolutely real. However, you guys abuse this too much. Like, I see this way too much. Like, you look like this person, you look like that person.
Yeah.
It's just not true at all. It's just anybody who has glasses, you know? Oh, you look like Drew Carey. What?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Cleveland rocks. Yeah, I don't know about that. I will say, as someone who's been to Germany, it's possible you went there and forgot. That's how unremarkable it is. Now, it's like going to Ohio. Or I don't want to bring that up because we've already brought it. It's like going to Missouri. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah, it's like, cool. Everything's just a little different here, but otherwise it's exactly the same. Why am I here right now? That's what I was kind of thinking. Both times that I went there. Yeah. But nonetheless, lovely people. Now, I wanted to bring up Mike McDaniel, not only because I'm a football fan, but because I actually think he does look like you. And knowing you, and Micah actually brought it up independent of me because we were watching football this past weekend, huddled in, and she's like, that guy does look like Chris. And I was like, yeah, he does. But I agree with you because a lot of people bring that shit to me too all the time, telling me that I look like, especially when I used to wear glasses, which I haven't in years, and earrings. When someone has earrings, like that, people don't usually see them, but my hoop earrings, they're like, oh, this person looks like you. But I keep saying the person that I'm told I look like the most is Anthony Bourdain by a mile. And what? I find that strange personally.
Yeah.
Many, many, many people have told me this over the years.
That is sincerely schizophrenic.
I started to believe it when people that were unrelated and couldn't have possibly known each other were saying it,
You look so unlike Anthony Bourdain. It's uncanny how not like him you look.
Yeah, I would agree with you with that. I don't see it either, although I'm probably on a similar path.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. I love him, by the way. Kitchen Confidential, one of the great biographical works of the modern era, no doubt. Autobiographical. Yeah. What a fucking book. If people haven't read Kitchen Confidential, you got to read that book. Oh my God. That's the book that made him famous, of course.
Yeah. Mike McDaniel, I see it a little bit more than other people.
Yeah, like he's young.
I can understand this. I can understand this a little bit more.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I brought it up, because I know. Like,
yeah.
I would never mistreat you. Don't worry. Let's see what else is here. Greg Dawson wrote in, I wanted to ask about this. I was going to go listen, but I thought I would just confront you instead. Colin, during the pickup last week about Resident Evil, your children made fun of your alone time. Tell them to grow up and stand down. If Big C needs time with Big D, then that's what needs to happen. What is this?
Because so I can't remember exactly the order of it, but you said, I'm in the shower, LOL. So you were laughing.
Because we were discussing if we're going to do the pickup or not.
Yeah.
You were in the shower.
And then you said, I'm currently indisposed, which I've only ever heard I'm indisposed in the context of I'm currently masturbating.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's the only, like, I've never heard it's like, I'm indisposed right now. I got to pick up my kids. Like, it's more like,
you don't have to worry about
I'm sorry.
I wouldn't put on any airs.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm in a mode right now. I can't just snap out of this.
I'm beating off right now. I mean, I'm getting, there's no going back. So just give me a few minutes here. No, I'll be honest with you. I was just really lazy.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
I was like, I had just worked out and gotten out of the shower. Something happened where I'm like, I just don't want to do this. And I also didn't think, I really wasn't, when we record, sometimes we know that there's going to be a pickup or we suspect that there's going to be a pickup. I never mentally prepared for there to be a pickup. I just assumed because they weren't making a very big deal out of this that there wasn't going to be very much to say. So I was just like, I don't know. So I never even calculated for it. It's all my fault.
Did you like what you saw, though, of Resident Evil 4?
I didn't watch.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm out.
It's good.
I'm positive.
Very good.
I just don't want to see anymore. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. So I didn't watch. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by Chime's award-winning banking app and suite of basic banking features, and you can learn more about what Chime can do for you at chime.com/sacred. As the old saying goes, cash is king, and there may be some times when you need your paycheck a little bit early, whether to cover some outstanding bills, deal with unexpected expenses, or some other reason that will no doubt manifest in your life at the worst possible time. A great way to get access to your paycheck up to 2 days early without annual fees, large security deposits, or credit checks is to use Chime and their award-winning banking app. Of course, the perks don't stop there. You can gain access to checking and savings accounts, credit cards, and more. You can even be defended by fee-free overdrafts if you make a mistake. But let's stick to the early payday thing. Sounds too good to be true, right? It really isn't. See, if you treat your finances with the seriousness they deserve, then benefits begin to show themselves. This is just one of many, a scratching of the surface, if you will, brought to you by Chime. Take good care of your money, my friends, and your money will take good care of you. And start basic. You don't need to jump into the deep end. This is why Chime is so great. It's accessible, not sophisticated and alien like so much of the financial world. See for yourself why Chime is so loved at chime.com/sacred. That's chime.com/sacred. That's chime.com/sacred for basic banking options like a checking account, savings account, credit card, and banking app. Chime is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank N.A. members FDIC. Early access to direct deposit funds depends on payer. SpotMe eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. See chime.com/spotme. Chime was the 2021 #1 most downloaded banking app in the U.S. according to Apptopia. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy, which you can sign up for right now at betterhelp.com/symbols. I'm grateful to live in an era where the stigmas around mental health have been eroded into oblivion. No longer is it taboo to discuss the mental health issues that each and every one of us suffers from during our lives. That's because we all deal with the same challenges: tough relationship situations, family problems, issues at work, and a general sadness or malaise that's all too relatable. The list goes on and on. But a great way to fix all of these issues and more is to talk it out with a professional. And BetterHelp and their brand of online therapy lowers barriers and makes high-caliber mental health assistance more accessible than ever. See, when I'd go to therapy in the past, it was inconvenient. It worked, yes, but it was inconvenient. Going somewhere probably farther away than you'd like, sitting in a waiting room, paying an arm and a leg for the honor, you can no doubt relate. But the end product, it's important. And BetterHelp gets rid of all the nonsense so that you and that product, the professional mental health care you seek, is all you get. None of the other chicanery and nonsense that can come along with it, and more affordable than ever. To feel sad is to be human, this is true. But it's important to utilize another uniquely human trait, agency, to overcome what burdens you. Only then can you operate at your fullest potential and see what the maximum you can do out there on the battlefield of life. No matter what ails you, mind and spirit, therapy can help, and BetterHelp is ready to reach out a hand. Whether conducted over video or merely via audio or even just with text, help is right around the corner. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/symbols. That's BetterHelp.com/SYMBOLS and get 10% off your first month of therapy sessions. Again, that's betterhelp.com/symbols for online therapy that can help you feel better right now. All right, finally, and I want to know what you guys think of this idea. This I'm serious about. Dharma Police wrote in, said, "Hey there, soppy, sloppy slitters. Can you stop?"
I think I'm. What's the word? A moratorium on
moratorium?
on slit on the. If you write in with slitter, we will come to your house and arrest you. We don't have the authority to do that, but we will circumvent the law to do it.
Do you have to call things soppy?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know it's like that when the guitarist threw that band out, that was soppy.
wet.
There's still DNA in that. You could clone him in the future if you want.
Hell yeah, dude.
We considered that. Definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
You can beat off with it.
Technically, that's true. Never mind.
Oh, yeah. Then you get like a really creepy hybrid.
Yeah. Or a disease. I mean, who knows? I'm not saying he's diseased. I'm saying because it's sweat and all of that. You know what I mean? Okay. Let's go back to the question here, or the comment. Dharma Police, I'm sorry. You claim that Around the NFL is the biggest inspiration for the show's vibe and format. It is. Yet, I feel you're missing one key ingredient, the soundboard audio bites. On ATN, often when making a particular commentary, the producer will play a sound clip which serves as something of a recurring audio meme for the show. It's true. It's like one of the funniest parts of the show. I was listening to Sacred Symbols a couple weeks ago, and out of nowhere, Colin squealed, "Take me to Raytheon," and thought, how amazing would it be for the boys to insert a soundboard with relevant audio memes into the show to accent some of the recurring topics and discussions. Just a cherry little thought and riff, one of Colin's favorite shows. Thanks kindly, and KOFTC. Thank you for that. Now, Around the NFL is a major inspiration of mine. That podcast is awesome. Love it. And they do have a soundboard. But the thing is that they have a producer who doesn't really, he engages, is named Gravedigger. And what's funny is that when he talks, he even presses a button on the soundboard that's like announces his arrival. So that's, they're very embedded with that, but it's a much higher level of production than the show is. I like the idea of having soundboard, sounds and stuff. And it's fucking laugh out loud funny the way they use them on that show. Like, they make so many, because it's the creation of a shit ton of in jokes. Like one of the in jokes on the show, and I know you guys don't like football, but for those out there, is Carson Wentz on the Washington Commanders, the quarterback, where he did this like social media video that it's called the Washington Commanders, and he was like really looking forward to taking command or whatever, something like that, like something just stupid. But you could tell it was like the 10th take, and the social media person was like whatever, got the best take they could from him, and that just became a massive in joke on the show because they kept playing it to the point where it's like this, it's hysterical. It's like a part of that show's culture. And maybe we are missing out on something on that. I don't know. But the thing is that they have someone that can pay attention to the production while the other people are hosting. We don't have that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Colin, I had a question for you.
Sure.
What was your game of the year last year?
Outriders.
Oh. Well, and that's the other thing,
Wow.
I heard the other day, Phil Spencer said Game Pass is profitable. Yeah, exactly.
For the answer, because people have been messaging me about this, my answer to that is I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I hope that I made that clear.
It's okay though,
because it's not money in, money out. I don't know. I have to be talking to people that we're talking on the same level of business. Like, we're not talking about just like dollar in, dollar out. We're talking about the opportunity cost of not selling games a la carte and what that costs your enterprise. And there is no way that it works out like that. I'm sorry. But anyway, I don't care. This is an Xbox show. So go on. What were you saying?
We got Jim Ryan's response.
He's always crying.
Yeah, that's actually audio of him too.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Crying Jim.
Direct quote for Sacred Symbols.
He's always crying. All right. What were we talking about here? Yeah, that's it. So yeah, soundboard. Maybe in the future. Maybe we'll get like a real producer one day, but I doubt it. I doubt it. I do know on the Zoom there is like some sort of functionality with that. I think
that's what I was just using.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, we could figure that out, but also it's a very fine line. You see, around the NFL, I actually think the show is really funny, and I think that that's one of the reasons why people like the show. And that's one of the things around the NFL it has too, is that it's just incredibly funny. You don't want to lean into it. You want it to happen naturally, right? That, in my opinion. So you don't want to pre-produce the bit.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll see. All right. That's all we have for that for now. How long have we been going? How do I read this thing? 33 minutes.
Yeah, 33.
All right. That's about right. Let's talk about some more relevant information now. First of all, God of War Ragnarok. What is it? November 9, something like that? It's out in the wild. We obviously don't deal with PR and marketing by rule, so we are not going to get access to the game. Also, Sony long ago blacklisted us anyway, so it wouldn't be like we would get it if we wanted it. It's already in the wild. People are playing it. I think there are going to be like previews, or have already been like preview impressions, and then the reviews I think come out the 3rd, which means that they're incredibly confident in it. I'm sure they are, and we'll play it along with everyone else and have and have our thoughts on it as well. In the meantime, I wanted to put out just some warnings. Like, apparently this game is being flagrantly ruined again. So why? Here's the thing. And I know you have to strike a fine balance, but at what point is Sony just gonna be like, we're not doing this at all anymore? Like, we actually don't really need the coverage, and they don't, right? Like, God of War is going to sell millions of copies, millions and millions of copies. And it's just shitty that people are so inconsiderate. Someone had written into the show, although I didn't use it, about Batman, or not Batman, Arkham Knights, or Gotham Knights, and how there was like a video fed into him to his YouTube algorithmic stream of like ending or a last boss fight with the thumbnail being the boss. It's like, dude, what the fuck are you guys doing? I don't understand that. When I was at IGN, as we've discussed in the past, and I would review games and actually have to worry about that stuff, I really went out of my way not to spoil it. I wouldn't even capture anything from the game that could be misinterpreted in a video review as ruining something. It wasn't even possible. I don't know. Have either of you guys, Chris, have you run into anything with God of War yet?
No. I've somehow avoided it. I haven't been searching though, so I mean that's probably pretty key to it. I don't know why this constantly happens. Like, there's always people just like out there ruining. Like, I've had games ruined for me in the past for sure, but I didn't get God of War ruined for me. There was like, wasn't there another game sort of recently, like in the last like couple months? Like, oh man, I feel like there was like a big spoiler. Maybe not even in the last couple months. Maybe it was like later last year. I can't remember. But there was like this big spoiler campaign going around for this. Oh, damn it. It's going to bother me. Somebody write in.
Familiar, but yeah.
Somebody write in about it, because I'm blanking right now. But I've somehow managed to avoid spoilers for a very, very long time for most things. The thing that I almost got fucked for me was Spider-Man when that came out. Because just the trailers themselves. And then eventually you would have like, oh, hey, Sinister Six. I'm like, God damn it. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that's I don't.
But that was in the trailer, and it was just like, why did you do that? Why?
That's the confusing part too. We discussed that at the time, because that was one of the big first party games that came out when we were doing the show together.
Yeah,
and it was interesting because we were wondering. I remember very clearly, why are you showing this so much? Do you really need to show it like this? And then they might look at it and say like, hey man, this was like the best-selling exclusive ever. I mean, we did exactly what we needed to do to sell it. I don't know. We'll see with the sequel how crazy they go. What's nice right now is that we don't know anything about the sequel.
Yeah,
they haven't shown it at all, and we should be playing it by this time next year, which makes it even more interesting. Dustin, have you managed to avoid God of War spoilers?
Yeah, no God of War spoilers so far, thankfully. The YouTube thing is a really annoying problem because I have had instances I can't think of specifically where basically if I have to search like a small guide or I want to look up a cutscene again while I'm playing a game, I'll turn on incognito mode or go off of my account just because I don't want the algorithm to feed me videos of a game while I'm playing it because of situations like that where YouTubers have absolutely no respect when making thumbnails and content like that. So that's annoying. Ironically, the thing that I was most recently spoiled for, I may have mentioned this show, I can't remember, was the last season of Stranger Things. And it was none other than Hideo Kojima, who just straight up posted some fan art spoiling the last or the next episode that I was about to watch, which was like almost the final episode. The day like I woke up the morning, looked at Twitter like I normally do. There it is. So thanks, Hideo Kojima, for that. Appreciate it.
Hideo Kojima spoiled Stranger Things for you. That's kind of amazing.
Here's one thing I just want to put out into the world, because I've discussed how things have been spoiled for me in the past. People spoiled the shit out of The Last of Us Part 2 for me just by nature of me having to go into our comments and delete people's shit or whatever. Just no consideration. And I don't understand what people get out of this mean-spiritedness. Why do you want to? I know I'm speaking to the choir, I guess, in a way, because I don't think there are a lot of people that do this, but what do you get out of doing that to someone? Why would you want to do that to someone? It's just so, it's first world for sure, but it's like very cruel to do that. Like someone lives in this fucking crushing environment with COVID and they're working the job they don't want and they're looking for some sort of escape and they're just getting by or whatever, and then you just ruin this piece of entertainment that might be like their only respite for a little while. I just think it's totally inconsiderate. It's relative to how we live today, but it's just inconsiderate, and I just want people to be careful out there about both putting that stuff out there, but more importantly with Ragnarok, avoiding those spoilers, although I don't know that you'd really be able to even spoil it for me because I don't even know what the hell is going on in the first game. All right. PSA, real quick. DualSense Edge, if you're interested, $200 Pro-style controller is now available to pre-order. PlayStation Direct, I think, is the only place you can do so right now, but I don't know if it's going to come to other merchants later. I assume so. I think they just want the money more directly. I have no interest in this thing personally. I think the DualSense itself is an awesome controller. Dustin, are you going to pick up the Edge?
Not till after it comes out and there's some reviews just to make sure that everything is good from a quality perspective. Just because when you have these highly customizable controllers, there's more failure points, and the Xbox Elite controller has a lot of them, which still, I don't know if to this day, but when I was looking into buying it, a lot of people were saying that, like, hey, don't buy this. It has a lot of quality control issues. So because it's so expensive, I'm waiting until after just to make sure, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's smart. It is a pretty expensive piece of kit too. So Chris, are you interested in the Edge?
Vaguely. I don't know if I really need. The thing is, I have so many controllers at this point. I'm just like, this is kind of irresponsible at this point to have this many. Like, I have 10 controllers. I have like 4 PS5 ones. I have 6 Xbox Series whatever ones, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I don't think I know this many people in walking distance that even, you know what I mean? Like that would play this here. So like, I'm overloaded on controllers. When one of them breaks, maybe I'll have an excuse to buy a souped up one, but as it stands right now, it just feels so unnecessary.
Yeah, I agree. I don't interact with games in a way necessary for me to have that sort of controller. I think it also missed my interest point. I remember being much more interested in this when the Pro first came out to Xbox One, holding it for the first time. It felt so boutique and heavy and interesting, but I think the DualSense kind of feels that way now. So I don't need this extra thing. And I think maybe that was the whole point to begin with. I also think $200 is just a lot of money to spend on a controller. I've never spent that much money on a controller in my life.
Yeah, I would never.
Spending $70 on the DualSense controller or whatever it cost me was insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, $150 for the Xbox Pro one was a pretty insane asking price as well. But again, like it was the first time we had seen something like that. I feel like this would have piqued my interest a little bit more if it had come earlier. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. All right, I wanted to say a quick note. Last week, of course, we leaked some of the nature of the plot details surrounding Star Wars Eclipse, which is the Quantic Dream game. Quantic Dream, of course, made Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls and Detroit Become Human, a longtime PlayStation partner, and now they're working on this Lucasfilm game, and it probably won't come out till 2026, 2027, somewhere in there. My sourcing indicates the game's not really even in production right now. They're still doing a lot of work around that in pre-production. Now, I leaked the story details, and it was picked up by a lot of outlets, and I think that's really cool. However, Tom Henderson, who is a well-known industry insider, who I consider very good at the craft, who we cite often on the show, picked up our piece and then called it a controlled leak. And I take great umbrage with this, and I actually reached out to him and told him personally. I told him, first of all, for people that don't know, a controlled leak indicates that a company releases something and then they're intentionally trying to trickle it to sources to gauge interest. This is often talked about, but doesn't happen in the games industry a lot. And anyone who says that it doesn't know what they're talking about. But what bothered me about this is that I would believe it if someone said this about something, but the only person who knows who the source is me. And I'm telling you that this is impossible for this to even be true. And I messaged him as much. I'm not going to obviously give away the nature of the source or anything like that, but I just gave him some details telling him, like, listen, dude, you're wrong. Like, you're wrong. You're just wrong. If you knew who the source was, if you knew where this came from, you would know you were wrong. And I'm just telling you as a personal courtesy, because you're usually right on the money and you're not right here. And he hasn't retracted, and we talked back and forth in perfectly friendly conversation. But I wanted to put it out there because I just feel like it has to be said that this kind of bothered me in the sense that it distorted the reporting, and it's not true. Like it's just straight up not true. And so I consider Tom Henderson unimpeachable typically, and I still consider him a great insider who clearly has great sources, and he's friendly and all that. I have no problem with him on a personal level, but he now gets knocked down, I think, a step for me, because I know for a fact that this is false. And knowing that just brings into question some other things that I took for granted. That's all. Now, the only really truly unimpeachable source I consider, and I say this begrudgingly because I don't like him personally, but you have to give him props for his work, is Jason Schreier. I think he's now the only purely unimpeachable source in games media right now. So I just need to say that out of defense for my own work. I find that a little weird. I told him in the message that, and I won't share what we said back and forth, and certainly what he said to me, I mean, that's our business, but I did say that I'm doing this as a professional courtesy. I would usually just let you be wrong, but I actually like you. And it bothers me knowing that you're getting something wrong because you are a great source. But that didn't seem to resonate with him. That's totally fine. I've invited him on the show a couple of times. When I invite him on the show, both times he said to me, I'm thinking of doing my own thing. And I think he's confused about what I'm saying, because I think he's like thinking I want to do a show with him or something. And I'm like, I'm inviting you to be a guest on my show. But I haven't made that very clear, I guess. And so maybe we can have something together in the future and talk. But I don't know. I just needed to say that because it's not true.
Yeah.
And I don't mind controlled leaks. Like, I don't think that calls into the veracity of the leak. In fact, it verifies if a leak is true or not. It just indicates that someone's being worked without their knowledge. And I've been doing this a lot longer than Tom. And I would know if it was a controlled leak or not. So it's not. He's wrong. Wanted to throw that out there just for the record. Okay. A few things that I wanted to touch on real quick. I don't know if you guys saw this. Kotaku wrote about it. Every US PlayStation 2 game manual is now scanned in 4K. And their subhead says, creating a complete set of US PS2 booklet scans took 22 years, over $40,000, and a ton of passion. It should be more than $40,000. Okay. Dustin, did you see this story? What do you think? This is a pretty cool project. I was clicking around. It's incredible. I wonder if it's going to somehow be taken down or whatever. I'm sure it's already been mirrored, so it doesn't really matter. But this is quite the undertaking. It's so funny, dude, because people might remember in the 90s there was a database of instruction manuals on the internet, but they were all typed up. So like you can get the Castlevania manual on NES, but it was just typed up or like whatever. This is so much more elite than that. So I think this is a really cool piece of history.
Yeah, and especially thinking about the difficulty of the challenge, thinking about certain games that are probably so extremely rare, very expensive, either having to purchase those or more likely try to get them on loan in order to scan these in, and gaining the trust of people with games that could potentially cost thousands of dollars in order to get the scan in. But from a preservation standpoint, this is awesome. I would love to see if there's a way that people could create reproduction manuals for games that they maybe own that they don't have the manual for anymore. That would be cool as well, just because manuals get thrown away all the time. So yeah, overall, a great thing for game preservation.
Chris, did you get a chance to click around this? This is your era too, your childhood era,
yeah,
much like Dustin's. So I'm sure there's a lot of nostalgia there.
Ah, this is very cool. I love this. This is amazing. I'm scrolling through Budokai right now, and this is very. I'm so happy that this. This is one of those things where you don't think you want this necessarily, because I've never once thought about like, I sure wish we had a 4K database of every single PS2 game manual. I've never once thought that in my life. But it's clear that, I do want this. I'm really glad that this is real. And I'm just scrolling through it now. This is great.
One interesting note just through scrolling through the list is that this isn't just one scan per game. Like right now I'm looking Crash Bandicoot, Nitro Kart reissue. There's some that have like special edition, or if there's some kind of variant that's scanned also. So this is very thorough, very impressive work.
Yeah, this is sick. I love this.
I'm Felicia Day, and I'm the host of the official The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power podcast. In every episode, I'm going backstage for an all-access look at what it took to bring Middle-earth to life. I'll even have the first full breakdown of the incredible season finale with the series showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. I will be sharing juicy behind-the-scenes stories and processing all the holy crap moments with the members of the cast and crew.
Numenor has got to be the most amazing thing ever, and we wanted it to just be the greatest kingdom of men that ever existed.
The elves are arrogant and vain. They're not beyond being corrupted.
Can I just say, watching Owen Arthur eat in his full regalia is the most hilarious thing.
So if you want to deep dive into every episode, watch The Rings of Power on Prime Video and listen to all 8 episodes of the official The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power podcast for free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app now.
All right. Next up, I wanted to just bring this to the fore. This is being written about by a lot of different places, but there's a new academic study that I have here mirrored on some research site. And it's called Not Just a Game, Identity, Fusion, and Extremism in Gaming Cultures by a series of academics. And this was apparently funded in part by Take This, which is the dubiously useful organization at best, I think, that exists in the games industry to kind of like deal with mental health and whatever. I don't know. But I just wanted to bring this up because I thought this was interesting. People have been talking about it. It's been circulated a lot. It's an extensive study. We're not going to read nearly all of it. And of course, it is heavily cited too. So there's a lot of endnotes to go through if you want to do that. But I'll read the abstract. And I'm curious what you guys think of this. Extremist ideologies have clearly become increasingly prevalent in the world of video games. What is less clear, however, is the mechanism through which these ideologies make their way into the psyches of gamers. Here we focus on the potential role of identity fusion in the radicalization of video gamers. In 3 studies, we show that fusion with gaming culture is uniquely predictive of a host of socially pernicious outcomes, including racism, sexism, and endorsement of extreme behaviors. We also show that specific personality attributes like insecure attachment and loneliness may interact with fusion with gaming culture to further amplify support for extreme behavior, and that specific gaming communities like Call of Duty may serve as catalysts that encourage strongly fused gamers to embrace antisocial attitudes and behaviors. These findings contribute to a theoretical understanding of the psychological processes that foment radicalization and guide the development of strategies for discouraging extremist ideologies in gaming spaces. So it basically makes some sort of tangential connection, and it goes through lengths to say, like, it's not trying to say this about everyone, but just that there are subsections of gamers that are clearly antisocial. And what I find interesting, and this is kind of my take on it, is I'm sure this is true. I mean, I think you can readily see that there are antisocial behaviorisms in gaming. I have no doubt. However, I thought it was interesting that they only focused on what would be considered right-wing ideology or broken ideologies like, say, white nationalism, which is, of course, horrible, or right-wing, more fascistic authoritarianism, which is also horrible. But they don't focus at all on the insanity that's going on the other side of the spectrum, too, that I think is also poisoned by video games in some way, too. So I just find it incomplete. It's not that I'm really offended that you're saying that people that use the N-word in a Call of Duty lobby are racist. It's like, okay, I believe you. But I just wonder why it's not more explorative of the full spectrum of political and social inadequacies that are in this industry. So that was my takeaway. Dustin, do you think anything of this?
So I mean, I didn't read any of the study at all. So anything I'm going to say is somewhat just conjecture of my opinion about this. Gaming is a core part of our culture now, and our culture is becoming more extremist through social media, the way we interact with one another. So, like, my gut reaction to this is like, yeah, of course. Like, along with people that heavily use Twitter all the time, people that heavily use Facebook and Facebook groups, people that are heavily involved in Reddit. Like, to me, it's just like, of course. I don't know. It seems like it's like, why even bother? I guess there is a bigger question overall beyond gaming is why is we as a culture are becoming more tribal in our beliefs. You know what I mean? It just seems like a kind of a waste of time to me. But again, I didn't read it, so maybe what I'm saying is shit.
No, I mean, I only read parts of it. It's actually pretty cogently put together, thankfully. Some grids and charts, whatever, but there's a lot of subsections. I guess, and I'm just curious about this, Chris, is that I don't know if what I'm saying really resonates, but I find they have a section in QAnon, for instance, right? Which is insane, which is completely insane. I know.
Yeah.
Like, a right-wing Trump kind of aligned ideology, but why wouldn't you also examine the ideology, the opposite side of the spectrum, or like another crazy ideology, the ideology that tells you that there's 50 genders, or the ideology, you know what I mean? It's like, it just seems like it's kind of picking on just one side of the ideological spectrum, when my argument would be that it seems fairly obvious that video games and the video game space create enough they widen the mental barometer, or mental parameters, I should say, of what is possible or what someone thinks is happening or real. And that goes perhaps in all different directions, because we were told for years that Russia hacked the United States election or something. That didn't happen, right? So are the people that believed that as crazy as the people that are QAnon? And if so, can we somehow categorize and put that into a more inclusive study that looks more holistically at all of the different ways that society is broken, instead of just, again, heaping it all on one side as if the other side can't do any wrong? That's my major problem with this particular study.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, there's so much to go into. I feel like first of all, I want to say that I agree with Dustin's general takeaway. It's like, yeah, I just think culture in general is kind of headed in this way, and I think it's mostly due to social media and just the way algorithms feed people. Like, the best way to get engagement is to make people angry, and when people are angry, they engage more, and then they huddle into smaller and smaller groups of people who believe similar shit. And I think social media is the main culprit of all this shit, to be real with you. I think gaming is largely a red herring. And has been for ages. Even back then, back in the day when people were like, video games are destroying people's attention span, even though you have to go consciously play a video game, as opposed to social media, which we're all universally addicted to and follows us everywhere we go. On the bus, people do it on Twitter while they're fucking driving. It's so much more of an actual problem, but everybody is consumed by it, so it's not treated as such. And I always feel like gaming has always been the scapegoat for larger issues, but I don't know. It's tricky. Is the belief that Russia hacked the 2016 election crazier than thinking JFK will return? I don't know. I don't know if they're exactly like. I know what you mean, that it's all insanity because it's all fucking wrong. But I guess it's harder to focus on, because if you're playing a Call of Duty game, no one's screaming like, no one's like screaming, there are 50 genders, they're screaming like the N-word and stuff, it's I think it's the inherent language of these conversations that are a little bit more easy to jump onto and latch onto, because obviously like shouting racial slurs is more like surface level toxic than spreading the idea of like, I don't know, communism through like a basic kind of like, oh, well, this is how this function of government works. And people just aren't really talking about that. I've always felt this way about even meme culture. Have you noticed like even like left wing memes tend to be like really like wordy and really overwrought and really
for some reason it's just impossible to do memes in the left wing format. I don't know why that is.
It's gotten better, to be fair, but like for a long time it was really just like big walls of text and no one's gonna read that. Whereas like on the right wing it was like, lol, shut up. It was just Wojak like crying fit, and it's just a little bit more.
It's so funny.
I think the transparency of how obviously insane, like front facingly insane QAnon is, and how front facingly bigoted just shouting racial slurs is, versus the problem with a little bit more extremist left wing stuff is like it lies a little bit more underneath the surface. And I say that as somebody who is very, very like remarkably left wing, it's just, it takes a little bit more deconstructing to get to what is wrong with those ideologies than it does with some of the more obvious ones. And I think that's why these things kind of tend to focus these in this direction, not necessarily because there isn't also just a general bias, because I do think in the gaming, as far as the population of people who play games, I do think there are probably more, I don't know, maybe like libertarian or right-ish. I wouldn't even say right wing necessarily, but not super left. But in the media, the gaming media, it's more obviously left wing. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's this divide, and so this study isn't about journalists. You know what I mean? So I don't know. There's a lot of, again, I say this as somebody who hasn't read through this entire study. This is just my basic kind of understanding and how I've seen it throughout the years and how I've seen people interact. I've been in all sorts of political spaces over the course of the last 7 years. I have a lot of experience talking with a lot of people from, I've spoken to people who are QAnon people, and it's shocking. And I've spoken to people who are absolutely communists, and I have friends who lean everywhere. So based on that perspective, I feel like that's what's happening. And it's a very complicated situation. And I think, again, gaming is largely just not really important to this conversation because it's just indicative of what's happening on a far, far larger scale due to, again, the algorithmic reprogramming of people through social media.
Yeah, it's very well said. Very well said. I believe, because I think we agree in the sense that some people's gut reaction to the study was like, that's not happening or games, or that's not indicative of what video games are all about. And I'm like, I mean, video game culture is one of the earliest internet cultures, if not the earliest internet culture. When you go on GameFAQs, one of my favorite things is to go and find FAQs that were written before the World Wide Web even existed. These things were on Usenet and brought over and put on the World Wide Web, and they're dated like 1987 or something like that. It's like, dude, we were dominating the space forever. And the tenor of the space is no doubt influenced by gaming culture in a major way. I don't think that's not true. That's why when the whole Gamergate thing happened and it was bastardized and misrepresented, I thought it was really dangerous and fucked up because there was an element of truth to it. It was just being misrepresented in a way to feed a certain political, social, ideological bent. And so I guess what I'm saying is that when I see a study focusing, it's like gamers can be racist. It's like, no shit, dude. I think that like the bigger thing is that, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, we know. The bigger thing is like, what is the deeper, and you were saying this, what is the deeper ideological chipping that is going on underneath? What does it mean when a person circulates a guillotine GIF? What does it mean when a person, right, like circulates a hammer and sickle? What is the deeper ideological stuff that's happening underneath? And I think that that's happening on the other side too, and is worth exploring, similar to what is going on with QAnon. In other words, I don't think any natural observer wouldn't debate that this space can be incredibly toxic. I receive it every day. So I can only imagine what it really is like for so-called marginalized people. You know,
Totally.
It's hard to, you can't really attack me for being a white male. You can if you want, but it's the social argument is that it's kind of the pinnacle of carefree existence. And if that is the case, then I'm sure it gets much worse underneath. But I just think it always goes in one direction. And that's all I'm saying. It always goes in one direction. And that was what happened with Gamergate. And whatever that was, I can't wait almost for the 10th anniversary of Gamergate, because even though it's going to be insufferable in a lot of different ways, there definitely will be thoughtful people that will really get into it and maybe deconstruct it for the first time with distance.
Maybe.
A lot of grifters, a lot of people still circulating today that were lying and telling the lies and people. I can't even believe some of these people are still, you know, like you are Brianna Woos, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
How?
It was a very interesting. It's a very interesting time.
But anyway, we're getting off the beaten path. I just want to be, you know, that was the thing that was circulating. I thought it was very interesting. I suggest people go read it if they'd like to learn more and make your own decision, make up your own mind. Yeah, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say just don't, like, because I'm alongside you where you were like, you saw a lot of people writing it off. I really, you have to be willfully like not paying attention to the world around you to not notice how insane everything is getting. You know, just in general, like communication and just like people, like a lot of social media is scary. I'll just leave it off and say there. I feel like we stumbled into this dragon way too quickly. like we're way under leveled for this. Yeah, but we've got it.
Totally, and we will leave it, but it's something worth exploring again in the future. And I think people, how do I put this? I think people take on, and I think this is actually something the study says, which is demonstrably true in my experience in the industry, which is that the more likely you are to call yourself a gamer or like really take on the role of games being a part of your personality, the more likely it's going to be that something like this is very personal to you. But it shouldn't be. The reality shouldn't be offensive in either direction. So just open your eyes and ears and you know what the situation is. And you're right. I think you used to say something to me, though, Chris, that I think has not turned out to be true, which is that you would often reiterate that things were very online, right? Like the problems are very circulating online. And I'm like, I don't know about that anymore.
Well, yeah.
And that's where the that I do think it's just generally getting crazier. And our industry is a place where people go to hide from that. And that's awesome. But you shouldn't want to escape from, and I'm not saying you're saying this, of course, but people shouldn't want to say like, oh no, that doesn't happen in our space. It's like, yeah, it does, dude. Yeah, it does. So that's why I just felt like it was almost like, why are we having this study at all? Let's get into something deeper. And maybe they will one day. I don't know. But nonetheless, interesting to check out if you'd like. A couple more quick notes. I just wanted to point out The Guardian, British newspaper, did a really interesting interview by Simon Parkin with Hideo Kojima, and I just wanted to recommend it. It's called I Want to Keep Being the First, Hideo Kojima on 7 years as an independent game developer. A lot of really interesting little teases and tidbits in there for people to read, so definitely check that out. I wanted to also share with people, this just came out, I think this morning as of we're recording. Yeah, what's the date? Yes, that's true. Callisto Protocol, which we're very excited about, comes out in December. Survival horror game, the first from Striking Distance, will not get a Japanese release at all. It can't clear a Sero rating to get a saleable release there because it is too violent, and they feel like cutting it anymore will not give the true experience, so it just will not come out there. This is really not a huge deal, and in fact, I think will make the game a weird delicacy, let's say, in Japan, with no region locking, which we've not experienced in generations now on PlayStation. You could play a bunch of PS3 and PS4 games between Japan and North America and Europe. It was no problem. PS2 was really the last console that locked you out like that. I think you're going to see a lot of people importing this over in Japan, and so they'll be totally fine. What do you think about this, Chris, about them refusing to make any further edits?
I love the idea that a game is so violent that a country won't sell it. I love that.
It's usually Australia, funny, that does that, with Manhunt and shit like that.
Yeah, I think even Grand Theft Auto had a troubled history in Australia as well. But I don't know. I was already excited for it. I don't know if this adds anything to it because I was expecting it to be very violent. We've seen already how violent it is. So it's not like this is real. Oh, well, I thought they were bluffing, but now that it's banned in Japan, now I really believe the game is violent. It's not so much that, but it does add a little bit of a... there is something really positive added to the game for me for whatever reason. I was just like, ooh, that's it's been a while since we've had this kind of thing, I feel like, outside of Australia, where it's just like, wow, even because Japan is, I mean, I don't know, man. I've seen some pretty violent shit out of Japan, so the idea that it's too much for them is kind of awesome.
Yeah, they released because Callisto Protocol has a Japanese account, and they released a statement in Japanese, and it was that Dr. Sirkin Toto guy that sometimes retweets things from Japan on Twitter was just saying that basically the Sero people just didn't like the level of violence, and they just won't change the game. Dustin, how do you feel? I think that's pretty cool. I mean, it's going to cost them something. They definitely wanted to sell the game there. Survival horror is really big in Japan. But I just think that the international market and the nature of the consoles is such that you really don't have to overcome a major hurdle to play the game if you want to in Japan. The unfortunate reality is the yen is getting murdered, so it's going to be really expensive. But, you have to do what you have to do, I guess.
Right. I have a lot of questions. Chris brought this up, but I've seen some very violent anime before.
Yeah,
and
100%.
So now maybe this just has to do with something with the CERO rating board is just a different entity than whoever deals with rating stuff for anime, and it's just kind of a whole different ballpark. It's a possibility, but it still brings in the question of why for a video game and not for a show. Maybe it has something to do with interactivity. But yeah, it's cool that we now live in an environment where, Colin, you mentioned someone could import a physical copy, but you also could just set up a VPN and then download, set your computer to another region or your internet to another region, and then just download it. There's nothing stopping anybody from doing that. You can do that here. If you want to unlock a game, a day early, you can technically set your VPN to New Zealand and get it. Technically, that is against terms of service, so, do it at your own risk. But I've never heard of anyone getting banned for anything like that. But yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I always find Japan is such an interesting place with its cultural norms and how they are similar and completely different to ours at the same time. Whether it's violence, and I mean particularly sexuality, is something that is just totally viewed in a different way in Japan. And just kind of a culture shock, even though they feel very close to us and far away at the same time.
Yeah, I think the thing I find a little disturbing about, not a little, is the most disturbing part of Japanese culture to me is just age more than anything. I think it was only maybe 10 or 15 years ago that there was even instituted an age of consent at all. And I think the age of consent is 13, if I recall.
Ah, okay.
So there's I think that's true. So
I was going to Google that, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, you might. So I think it's just there are these different cultural mores that run into each other and are maybe not necessarily ill-born anyway, but just aren't resonant with modern Western culture. And it is fascinating to watch how those different things intersect and what gets through and what doesn't, I think is fascinating too. Everyone's seen Japanese porn. It's hysterical. What are you doing? Why are you blurring it out? What is that doing to mitigate if you feel like this is oppressive to women or anything like that? It's very interesting over there as well. I agree. All right, a couple more stories I want to get through real quick. The game spoof. I've never heard of this website, but this is an interesting report. Silent Hill 2 Remake has reached the late stage of production, it says. So there's an event in Poland called GPW Innovation Day. I looked it up. I never heard of it, but it's just this place where companies and tech companies kind of talk about what they're doing in Poland every year. And these guys apparently were there, have a source that was there. And Peter Babeno, who's the president of Polish team Bloober team, which is the studio that is working on Silent Hill 2 Remake for Konami, as we revealed a couple weeks ago, they noted that the game actually entered development in 2019, and that they're kind of in the late stage of development. So we might actually be playing this game fairly soon. There's not much else to say about that. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's maybe a 2023 game, which would be fascinating. And then finally, over on EA.com, Electronic Arts official website, they wrote on the Dragon Age subblog a new milestone for Dragon Age Dreadwolf. So this is the new Dragon Age game that has an unknown release date. The big deal here is that the game is an alpha, and so it is playable now, beginning to end. And I guess I never really... I don't know. I didn't think they were this far along for some reason. Even though I know the game has been in development for a long time, I'm surprised that they actually can start now moving the game towards beta and actually cleaning it up. So I have no excitement for this game at all. I think Dragon Age is perfectly boring, but I know a lot of people are excited about this. And I like EA's slant of talking more and bringing people in. I think it's really neat. So they're doing that with Skate. They're doing that with Dragon Age. They're doing that with other games. So shout out to them as well for that. All right, that's all of the news. Let's get into the games we're playing. Chris, let's start with you. It says you're playing 2 different games here.
Yeah, I'm still working my way through Dishonored 2. That's an older game. I'm still really, really liking it. I just love the way Arcane builds their games, and it's especially with the way that you can... Their stealth mechanics are really, really good. Like, I really love the stealth in Dishonored 2, and funnily enough, I feel like this week has just been a very, very stealth week for me because I'm also playing A Plague Tale Requiem on PC because I cannot with 30 frames or 40 on Xbox. What the fuck? I can't do it. I can't. I will not do it. And it's running pretty well for me. There are, like Dustin, I think, alluded to, there are some hiccups, but surprisingly enough, they're not as annoying as I thought they would be. Like I was expecting a lot more of like a for whatever reason, when some games when they run poorly, it's like, it's like a speed up slow down effect type deal where it's almost like you're rubber banding. But this, I feel like it does a pretty good job of, even when it's dipping in frame rate, it doesn't feel like improperly paced, I guess. I don't know. Like I'm just noticing that it's not bothering me as much as other games. Granted, that's probably has to do with the fact that it's a slower game in general, but there are performance issues still. I'm sure there will be a patch at some point, and this is one of those games that I could see aging really, really beautifully because as hardware advances, it's just going to be like smooth sailing from here on out. But this game's gorgeous. This game is a beautiful looking game. Like it's there's still like some jank with like the rats, like because it's
they
such
get stacked up.
Yeah, they get stacked, but it's
like a Goomba.
It's cool though. Like just seeing all these like this moving mass of like and the way they like pop out to like nibble at your toes if you get too close. It's like ooh, it's actually like really unnerving, and it's so nice to play stealth games again. Like I'm like if for no other reason than just the fact that this is a modern, full-fledged, really beautiful looking stealth game. This is just, it's a wonderful change of pace, and I think it's very, very good. I think the story is very, very good. The voice acting is superb. I think there is, I will say, something that I really appreciate, and I made a note of taking a note about this, is when you're supposed to be stealthy, or that when there are other characters around that are not supposed to hear you, the characters actually whisper, which is really, really nice. And it's not something that you would think about until you realize, like, oh, I've played a lot of stealth games, and oftentimes it's people on like a headset or something, and they're speaking normally, and I'm always like, what the fuck? Like, how is it's this weird disconnect that I've learned to kind of just like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm just not going to process that because clearly that's more for me than it is for the game universe. But Plague Tale takes that into consideration. So when there are guards that you're supposed to be sneaking past and your characters need to communicate with each other, they will whisper because that makes sense. And I've noticed it a lot, and I'm just like, this goes a lot. It does a lot to kind of sell the tension, just to have that extra detail placed into just the VO work, and it's really good. One thing I will say, as good as the story is, and as good as these characters are, these characters' faces are dead as hell. Like they have, it's very bizarre because you have this like these really great performances, but then the faces kind of like it's not that they look bad. It's just that they're animated in a very old way.
What happened to your face?
It reminds me a little bit of. It's not. I wouldn't say it's as bad as Mass Effect Andromeda. That's unnecessary. That was insane. But it's just a little incongruent, and it does kind of. I don't know. It feels a little weird sometimes. I've learned to kind of ignore it because the rest of the game looks so good and it plays so well. There's a lot of like really creative stealth puzzles. I love these tar mechanics and just the way that Asobo lets you play with physics a little bit more. It's cool. I really, really like A Plague Tale. I think I'm on chapter 6. I don't know how many hours in that is. It's either 6 or 5, but I've played a decent amount of it, and I'm really looking forward to finishing it. I'm pretty sure it's like a 25-hour game is what I heard.
Wow, is it really that long?
That's
so long.
Oh,
I would expect. That's cool, but I would expect. I don't know, man.
How long to beat says 16 hours.
Okay,
for main story.
Oh, okay,
that's good.
Yeah, that would have really put me out because I was thinking about maybe trying the first one over the break and maybe playing them both and playing it for 25 hours. That's not happening. So
yeah. It's good. It's good though. I really enjoy it. I love stealth games, and I'm glad that we are seeing them, even though they're probably not going to be particularly more common after this. So I'm just taking what I can get while I got it. You know, it's very good though.
Fair enough.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how it wraps up.
Cool, man. Dustin, what are you playing, my friend?
Well, I'll keep on the Plague Tale train. I'm also still playing this game, and I would just want to echo what Chris said about it being just an absolutely stunningly beautiful game. Some of the landscapes, and in particular, the lighting in this game is something that really stuck out to me, what's interesting is that it doesn't have ray tracing in it yet, and they're doing some ray trace lighting stuff in a patch later on, so I can't even imagine how good that's going to look. But I'm finding as I play more, this game, I wouldn't call it a buggy game by any means, but I am finding bugs in the game. I had a moment where there's lots of times where you have puzzles where you have to get across a certain area and there's a bunch of rats everywhere. So I crossed over, and the guy behind me that was like my friend, he was like slightly late, and so he just walked right through the rats, which definitely should have killed him. It was actually really funny to watch. Like something went wrong there. And I find sometimes the stealth can be a little weird. Like sometimes I'll get spotted when I feel like I definitely didn't deserve it, and sometimes I don't get spotted when I did deserve it, which is kind of an interesting thing. But overall, I'm mostly in for the story in this game, and like Chris said, the performances, the voice acting is very good. It's well written. Just overall, really enjoying it. The main game to talk about is Resident Evil 4. And I played this game because I'm going to be on a podcast. I'm guesting on a podcast pretty soon, specifically about this game. So keep an eye on my Twitter. I'll post that when it's out and ready. But I realized I never fully completed this game, ever. I got probably over halfway around the time when it came out on Wii, but I don't think I ever finished it because there's definitely stuff in that game that I did not remember. And this game's great. It's very good. I enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. I know that when the remake was announced, we had a discussion on whether or not it deserves to be remade. And upon playing it again, it does.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, man. Oh, man.
There's definitely, like, specifically the thing that I dislike the most is the camera of this game. There's a lot of times where it'll angle it slightly upward for no reason. I don't know if it's because it's trying to angle you towards like a higher ceiling or something like that, but the camera could be kind of weird. Ashley, the mechanic with Ashley is annoying. Just straight up having to deal with her and tell her to stop. Some people might find the strategy of telling her when to stop, when to hide, and whatever, but I wasn't really into that part of the game. But overall, I love Leon in this game because he's just like the definition of like late 90s, early 2000s cool. He's got like a Backstreet Boys haircut. He's got all these quips, you know. There's the famous line where he's like, "Where'd everybody go? Bingo," at the beginning, which is just amazing. And part of the pickup that Chris and I did last week, we talked about how it seems like through the new trailer they're keeping a lot of that. At least it kind of implied that
Good.
The kind of the cheese, the camp factor is still going to be there in the new one. So that's exciting.
Are the enemies still Hispanic?
I think so.
Well, I asked just because this was the first Resident Evil of 2 or 3 that was accused of being racist. And I was wondering how they were going, because it takes place in Spain. I was at least in the beginning. So I was wondering if they were going to make edits to that, because I would really be interested if they ever remake Resident Evil 5, which I think is a distinct possibility. Especially because I feel like Resident Evil 5 would speak to a modern audience a lot more because it is very shooter-ish. I didn't like it because of that. I was just like, what is going on in this game? Why are we fighting so much? But remember that beginning part when you're very similar in a village and you're just mowing down these like black villagers and people were freaking out about that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I'm like, well, what do you think is happening in Africa? I don't understand. But I wonder if that would be remade in a true way. If they did a remake of that.
I think they are still Spaniards. They are still Spaniards.
Cool.
For sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. They're like, this takes place in Alabama.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Sucks.
Dude, one question that I'm just wondering is that this game, as good as it is, and I understand how much of a landmark title, it kind of at the time was the beginning of the end of Resident Evil, just because they were kind of split between action and a little bit of puzzle with RE4 and then just went totally action. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if with the remake, they can kind of bridge that gap a little better. In fact, I hope it's playing through the castle part of the game. I hope it's radically different. Obviously hit the same story markers and stuff like that, but I hope it's more, they change it to be more traditional Resident Evil, backtracking, going through different rooms, picking up certain items, new puzzles. That would be awesome. Just because playing through it, especially after just playing 2 and 3 remake, I was like, man, this could, it feels like I want it to be more Resident Evil as far as what I just played, as far as the older ones. But it's old. It's not so much that I didn't think it deserved to be remade. I just think it's one of those things where it's like that game is so good, like well designed and so playable as is, that I feel like you could really get away with just taking the game as it is and just fixing the camera. You know what I mean? Like if Resident Evil 4 was just Resident Evil 4, but you could move while shooting, but it controlled like RE2 Remake, I feel like that would still be like a very, very playable game to this day. But I don't know, man. What we saw out of at least what you and I saw out of the trailer, it's like I'm so pumped. I think it has a distinct possibility. I don't say this lightly, but it could be better than the original, which is which is that's very difficult to do. I don't know of any. I mean, I guess Resident Evil 2 did it.
Yeah,
so
I guess RE2 I think is better. I don't think RE3 was necessarily better, but RE2 was better.
But I would also say that Resident Evil 4 was better than RE2 was. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like, as far as like,
no doubt,
RE2 has a lot more to improve, obviously.
Sure, RE2 is great, but RE4 is revolutionary when it came out on GameCube.
Yeah,
everyone fucking loved it.
But I'm pretty sold on it, man. Like, I'm excited. Like, I love that you're playing it again. I replay it every so often. Yeah. I replay it every so often. But it's I'm so excited for that new one, man.
I get spoiler for RE4, I guess, if you want to skip 30 seconds. I love the part when the guy in the helicopter dies and he's like, Mike! Like, it's like a big moment and you're like, who the fuck is Mike? It's just a great part.
It's so funny. I hope they keep it.
Dude, RE4 was so weird when it came out. For people that weren't around or weren't thinking about it, it was a GameCube game. It was part of a Capcom group of games called the Capcom 5. Yeah. And it was supposed to be 5 GameCube exclusives. Some of them came to fruition, like Beautiful Joe, and were ported to other platforms. Some of them never came out. Or one of them didn't. I think that game, what was it called? Dark Phoenix or something. That game never came out, but I think Piano 3 was one of them and a few others. Anyway, I love that Shinji Mikami, who obviously left Capcom and founded Tango Gameworks since, but he was the director of Resident Evil 4. I remember him saying, and you guys were young, so I don't know if you guys remember reading this, but he said he would cut his own head off with a chainsaw if it ever came to PlayStation. And then it literally came to PlayStation 2 a year after it came to GameCube. And that was one of the funniest things ever. Like, to just, because people didn't own GameCube, and a lot of people didn't, even though GameCube was awesome, and were waiting for it. And sadly, I think the game outsold it on PS2 when it finally came. So
can you imagine if we lived in a world where you just had You had to fulfill promises like that. It's a fact in like some alternate history that Shinji Mikami just cut his own head off with a chainsaw because he said he would.
Yeah, he's honor bound to do it. I was watching a documentary some years ago about this Canadian Soviet hockey tournament, and there was a journalist. It's basically about how the Canadians thought they were going to run roughshod over the Soviets, and the Soviets ended up really beating them up in this tournament. And there was the sports writer in Canada who said if the Canadian, and it was like the NHL All-Stars basically, if they lost a game or something, he would eat his shoe. And then he did something like that, where he like ate a piece of something on the steps of a building and actually went through with it, which I thought was pretty interesting. So there is honor out there amongst people. But anyway, go on, Dustin. You have more to say.
Last thing, just real briefly, I played the first mission of Modern Warfare 2, and it's very pretty. I gotta say, this game is a very beautiful game. Played just like other Call of Duty games, which was enjoyable, for sure. There's been a lot of controversy about this campaign. IGN gave it a 6, and a lot of people weren't very happy with that. But I see a lot of people saying they like it. Some people thinking it's kind of mid. But the degeneracy begins this weekend with multiplayer. I'm very, very excited. I've got tomorrow night totally planned out for Call of Duty. So should be cool.
Let me ask you, I know we're going to get into the campaign and what's controversial about it. I saw something that kind of piqued my interest on Twitter, and it was, I saw no Russian trending. And I was like, what is this? And I saw a cinematic that kind of implies that there might be something, like, I don't know if that's in the game or not, but apparently if it's a 6, it's not really that important. Or if a lot of people have a lot of problems with it. But if they do no Russian again, I'm stoked.
Whoa, yeah.
I can't even imagine
such a bold move.
That is still, I think, in gaming history, one of the most ballsy things I think I've ever seen come out of a studio.
It's the first time I remember a game telling you something bad was going to happen and giving you the option not to do it, which I don't remember a game ever doing before.
Which apparently they put in the last minute. I remember reading a story about how that was like not originally in the game, and then they were just like, I think it was like in the last minute that you should probably. Yeah,
they probably for a rating or something.
I think it was.
Yeah, that was cool. Well, let's get into it. As you said, Jared R. Meyer wrote into us on Patreon, and as you can if you're a Patreon supporter, thank you over there. Patreon.com/laststandmedia says, "Hey CDC, the campaign for Modern Warfare 2 has been out in the wild and review scores have dropped. I've seen some praising the game for focusing on real life places, groups, and concepts such as Iran, military contractors, police violence, and even the Mexican border wall. However, some reviewers have criticized the game for broaching such topics without having anything to say about them. My question is, do you think that games that broach heavy topics such as war or crime are responsible for making some sort of social commentary on those subjects? Should we look down on them if they don't? Thank you all for so much of the content you create for us. Really makes some long work days go by much easier." My take on this, and I don't have any experience with this game, so I don't. And Chris, it seems like you're familiar with more of the drama, so maybe we can go to you on this. But for me, I just think bringing something up as an event is totally fine, but it's a missed opportunity not to try to say something about it. I don't know why. If it really is true from my perspective, if I had played this and said that, why are they introducing all these elements without saying something about them, that would be a little disappointing. If you're gonna dare to broach Iran or something like that, then have something to say. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think the reason that these games don't have anything to say is because Call of Duty games, we were saying about no Russian, how strange that was, but generally speaking, they're pretty vanilla, and they're telling modern war stories, or they're telling future war stories, or they're telling historical war stories, but it's really about the kinetic action. It's not about us experiencing World War II for the first time. We know World War II. We know the Cuban Missile Crisis. We know all this shit. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with not saying anything about it or not spinning it in some way, but what's the point if you're not going to do that? So that would be my take on it. But Chris, what is going on with the controversy about this? I'm not been following this.
Oh, well, I just think it's a lot of people just aren't. I've just seen pretty low scores for it. Is all I know. Like, I think Dustin might know a little bit more, but I just know that the campaign hasn't been hitting as hard as people wanted it to for a lot of people. Obviously, these opinions are always mixed. There are people who think Call of Duty is the greatest thing in the world, and there are people like me who just I don't even think it's remotely. I don't know. I think it's fine. It's entirely okay. So Call of Duty has always been this kind of weird thing where it's difficult to really gauge the objective quality of it, because it's so popular and so just, like you said, vanilla, that it's kind of, I don't know. I just saw a lot of people kind of talking about how like, oh, I saw one thing where it was like Amsterdam or something. It was like, oh, we recreated it. They recreated Amsterdam. Look how beautiful it looks. And I was like, yeah, it looks, yeah. Like everything looks beautiful now. So it's kind of like, okay. But I think there was a lot of hype for Modern Warfare 2 because of what Modern Warfare 2 means. Because Modern Warfare 2, back in the day especially, was insane. Like Call of Duty 4 was crazy, but like Modern Warfare 2 was like real. Like everybody I knew was on Modern Warfare 2. Everybody. And everybody was excited about it too. It was a very, very different thing. But I don't know, Dustin, do you have any more of like a finger on the pulse of this?
I am finding that it's so hard to tell with a game like this, just because
I know
the fans will come out of the woodworks to dismiss any opinion that they think is not, quote unquote, not correct. But I don't know, what do you review a Call of Duty based on, about what it's trying to be? Is it not innovative enough? Whatever. It really comes down to how the reviewer chooses to review it. As far as this game, I've kind of seen stuff all over the place. IGN is definitely on the lower side with a 6, but there's a lot of 7s and 8s and stuff like that. But it is interesting thing, and I don't want to bring up this as too much of an aside, but this idea about reviews and reviewing a game for something that it's not. And I don't know if someone wrote in about this at all, and this isn't a PlayStation game, but a lot of people have been talking about this Bayonetta 3 Polygon review. And I just have to read this quote, because it's thinking about you, Colin, you mentioned about Call of Duty, the review saying that it doesn't push its ideas far, or it brings these up, but it doesn't have something to say. I want to read a quote from this Polygon review of Bayonetta. If all you care about is button ramming combat that's similar to Devil May Cry, you'll have a ball. But if you ever wanted to believe that there was something deeper to Bayonetta's story, some grander statement about femininity and sexuality and power dynamics, then you'll find the truth to be quite disappointing.
Cool.
So,
shut the fuck up. I'm so sick. I'm so tired. I'm so fucking annoyed with it. This Bayonetta discourse has been so fucking irritating, because like I remember it was like somewhat recently somebody was tweeting like it was somebody with a verified check mark, which I'm sure doesn't really mean anything, but it was something that that stuck out to me, and I noticed. I have
one that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I know.
But it was somebody who was like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't believe straight men are into this. You know, like oh, Bayonetta is not for straight. Bayonetta is just for like queer people. It's like, and this is like the whole point. And then you go back 10 years when Feminist Frequency was like, everything about Bayonetta's design, mechanics, and characterization is created specifically for the sexual pleasure of straight male gamers and the male gaze. And it's like, make up your fucking mind, or better yet, shut up. Shut the fuck up. This is all nonsense. Bayonetta is cool because it's fun to fucking play, and it also
she has guns on her feet. Like, come on.
And she's half naked the whole time. Are you joking? I can't believe straight men are into this. Are you for real? I don't know what the fuck is going. Also, why is that important? Shut up.
I mean, God, I'm preaching to the choir. I love hearing it.
It's to tie this into Call of Duty. It's just this idea of, I think that you should try to expect games to be something greater, I guess, in some ways, but there's also a line of like, you can't review a game for what it's not in some instances, and this is one of those instances where it's like, maybe they didn't want to tell a feminine power dynamic story. Maybe they just wanted to make a fun game that involves a woman with guns on her feet. Like, I don't know. It's just
this review is to me an example, especially seeing who wrote it, is an example of someone and just you're in search of a thesis,
right,
that's deeper than what the game is even intending. And that, I think, is interesting, but it can't be the core criticism of the game. That is something else. Saying part of criticism is talking about how a product doesn't fulfill the goal. But the goal is what's vital. And so if the goal is something else in your mind, then you can't qualitatively review the game properly. It's not, It's not something that you could, even in the subjective matter of reviews, you can't really put that into words. It's so that's the thing that bothers me about criticism is Mass Effect. To me, a lot of it is about, at least in the past, during the First Contact War and everything, is about human racism. And they go deep into that, right? And not only about that, but about racism towards humans. And that's in the game. So if you then identify that and say, it would be cool if they maybe went a little further with the race stuff or whatever. And that's like a criticism that I can kind of get on board with, because that was part of the intention of their political story. But if you're looking at Bayonetta and you're saying, how does this leather-clad, buxom brunette with her tits hanging out, is attractive to a male audience? That just shows that you're not even focused on the actual product as it is at all. You're doing some academic exercise, which is not, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something else. That's just my major problem.
I just remember feeling like gaslit by that tweet. Like, why would straight men be interested in Bayonetta? Feels like such an insane question. Also, just I feel like just Bayonetta is just cool for a lot of people. Like, I feel like it's just a universally like enjoyable kind of premise. Like, my brain's like breaking at the scenes when I hate thinking about this. But
one last thing that I just wanted to add to this is that this idea of, there's been a lot of criticism, rightfully so, of this idea of like higher fans, the people that thought Aloy wasn't pretty enough. The people that were critical of that, look in the mirror, because this is exactly the same thing. Oh, Bayonetta isn't what you expected it to be. It isn't fit into this like fantasy that the fans have created around Bayonetta. Like it's the same type of thing. It's just
excuse me.
Chris and I's brains are both melted at this point.
Yeah, I'm so tired of the discourse that because I saw that stuff circulating about Bayonetta, and I'm like, I can't. You get a little bit of a cursory kind of feel for it, and I know exactly where this is going. And the only good news about this is it's just, and you can just tell this is ringing with fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people. Every game that comes out, every article that's written, every day that passes on the calendar, these people are becoming more and more and more irrelevant as the musical chairs on the sinking Titanic continues ever inexorably forward, and there are fewer and fewer positions from which to pontificate to us about these various games. So we can at least take some sort of solace in that. But the game I want to talk about before we move on real quick, nothing much to say about it. Legend of Heroes, Trails of Cold Steel. Towards the end of the third chapter. The honest truth is I just have not had much of a chance to play. I've played maybe 10 hours in the last week. My dad was here this last weekend. I just had a lot of family things to do. So hopefully get back to that soon. I was playing it actually yesterday for a little while. It's a lot of fun. I'm just kind of in a holding pattern. I was thinking about Star Ocean, but it's just the timing's just not right. I also feel like that Star Ocean has half off written all over it in a few months, so why not just be smart and wait, especially because I'm probably not that interested in playing it. So yeah, I'm just patiently waiting for God of War, patiently waiting for Tactics Ogre, patiently waiting for Crisis Core, patiently waiting for Callisto Protocol. These games are just not here yet. And so we move on. All right, my friends, it's time to get into the news. There are quite a few items this week, so let's get into it in earnest. Number one, Sony's somewhat underwhelming London studio, long known primarily for its casual and peripheral-driven fare, is undergoing a sort of transformation. We could identify it through recent job postings and murmurings online, but now on a piece on website GamesIndustry.biz, London Studio's future has been more clearly outlined, and it's certainly not what we would have expected. First, some history. Sony's London studio, sometimes called Studio London or Sony London, was founded 20 years ago as a first-party team during an era when Sony's first party was tiny indeed, made up of only the likes of Liverpool Studio, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studio, San Diego Studio, Polyphony Digital, and Bend, so a fraction of its current size. And upon founding, its charge was clear: casual games with some sports fare and a few other notable items mixed in. Indeed, while the developer of the PS2 exclusive The Getaway dissolved into other teams, this one came to fill its place and actually did The Getaway's 2004 sequel, one of its very few core games. Otherwise, London Studio has released dozens of games across the SingStar and iToy brands, was a central component of the failed 2012 Wonderbook initiative on PlayStation 3 using PlayStation Move, and most recently released the PSVR exclusive Blood and Truth, which again took on a more hardcore tone. That game came out in 2019, and since all has been quiet. That's because, according to this article, London Studios' next game is different. Quote, a currently untitled online co-op combat game set in fantasy London, end quote. Importantly, it utilizes no move controllers or VR headsets or anything of the sort. It's a regular old PlayStation 5 game. A member of the team later notes, quote, our overarching theme is about bringing fantastical and magical elements and intersecting that with familiar worlds, and you don't get much more familiar to us than London, end quote. A single piece of art from the game's concept days has been shared, one of some sort of female, horned humanoid protagonist and others fighting against a dragon in front of Big Ben. Other than these small teases, the article largely wastes time talking about things no one is interested in, but there was an interesting nugget nonetheless. Quote, London Studio is one of the many PlayStation teams currently working on a live service product, end quote. This is interesting, simply because we had assumed most of these games would be coming from second party, and this indicates that may not be the case. Oh, and one more key detail. This game will be built on an all-new proprietary PlayStation-owned engine called the Soho engine. You may recall that in 2021, we reported on this show that Sony trademarked that name, and here we are. So Sony London has a charge. Dustin, let's go to you first. This was intentional. They talked to GamesIndustry.biz. Why do you think that they're doing this? I assume they've been hiring, and they've been openly hiring for this kind of thing. So I don't know if it's just for that reason. I think it's just a kind of maybe curiosity is a little piqued, and I think people look at London Studio as kind of, I hate to put it this way, but kind of a waste. It's just, they served a really vital purpose during the shovelware days on PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3, and certainly iToy was big and SingStar was huge. So there's no doubt that they were making a lot of money, but it just seems like no one ever gets excited. If you were to do a power ranking, they would certainly be at the bottom, I would think. So I don't know quite what to expect out of this. I was a big Getaway fan, so that's probably the last game in that ecosystem I ever even played 20 years ago outside of random shit that I might have played during my IGN days. But what do you have to say about London Studio and their co-op combat-driven fantasy game set in London?
I would encourage our listeners to go and check out this image that we've been given, this art. I don't know if it's key art. It's not key art, but this image from the game. And what this image tells me is that this is maybe at least one of the Fortnite, quote unquote, Fortnite type games that we're going to get. Just looking at this character in the very front, who it's not that she's dressed weird, but she's got sneakers on, some kind of pants with like a pink design on or whatever. That's the monetization. We talked about how needing a game that can be kind of an open, a blank slate where you can create different microtransactions things, a game where it makes sense in the universe that a character has devil horns like the character in this image does, or like, I don't know, a baseball hat or a samurai helmet or something like that. This seems to be that game, if I'm guessing. And I'm wondering just when we actually see footage, how much it will look like Fortnite. But that's, we knew that these live service games were coming. This seems to be our first actual glimpse of one. You asked me why they're talking about it now, and I honestly don't know. That's kind of the biggest question to me, is that something that I think we talked about on the Sacred Symbols Defining Duke episode is just that once God of War is out, it's kind of time for Sony to start talking again. That's kind of the thing that's kind of shielded them from saying anything, is that they have God of War coming. And after that, I think it might be time that we start learning about some of these various projects. So Sony London, they're a very interesting team. I remember interacting with those guys at PSX. The first time I played PSVR was playing the one demo from PSVR Worlds where you're like hiding behind the desk and shooting stuff. And
Right. I forgot about that.
That was like that was an amazing, everyone's first VR moment is very, very special. Something you never forget.
Right. That ended up being the kind of core for Blood and Truth, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was just super cool. So I hope it works out. I hope it's cool. This image at least looks interesting to me. I like the bright blues and purples. Looks cool.
What do you think about the texture over it? Do you think that that's like the graphical look of the game? There's like a stylistic, almost magazine print.
I see that now.
Click in on it, you know what I mean? I wonder, that's got to be intentional. I'm sure they got the highest resolution image, so there's something comic bookish about it. There's going to be something presentationally unique about it. I don't know. Yeah. Chris, what do you make of this?
I think the art design looks kind of cool. It does look. It doesn't look exactly like Fortnite, but it does look stylized in such a way that it could be. It doesn't have to look like a Plague Tale. It doesn't have to run at like 4K, and you don't have to see like sweat beating up on people's faces in 19,000p or whatever the fuck. I like the little goblin DJ on his laptop on the right.
That's awesome.
I think it's a cute little detail. But as far as why they're talking about it now or what I think about it, I just feel like it makes sense for them to start talking about these things now. It's funny in the write-up you say like we kind of expected these to come from second party, and that's kind of true. But also, I mean, you have to imagine that that Factions is one of these as well.
Sure.
So to me, it's not necessarily super surprising that it's one of these things that's coming out of a first party. In fact, I expect that probably more than these that you would expect are probably going to come out of first parties in some capacity, whether it be a smaller team at these studios working on something or be it the entire studio. I think they're going to have to make a really heavy push for live service, and especially and maybe I'm reading too deeply into this, but maybe the Microsoft Activision conversations that have been happening have maybe made them think about maybe coming out a little bit earlier than they otherwise would, even if now is the appropriate time for them to start talking, now that God of War is kind of almost out and about and kind of in play. I could see them maybe wanting to have saved this for at least a couple more months at the very least, but maybe trying to get out ahead of it, being like, hey, we've got some stuff coming, don't worry, because right now there is kind of a drought outside of Spider-Man that we know for sure, and we're getting some little,
and Wolverine. Those are the only two games.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just think they want to get things out as early as possible so that maybe they can react to feedback as early as possible. And who knows when we'll see this thing, but we're gonna see a lot more of these, so be prepared.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of was my disappointment, because Horizon Online is a guerrilla game, it seems like, or maybe Fire Sprite. So that's a first party thing. Yep. I guess I was just, as these started stacking up, I start getting a little nervous because I don't know if we're going to start getting encroached upon with the games that we really need. They can't forget. Maybe they can. Maybe it could be that they're just like, we can't ultimately survive making Uncharted. We can't do it. Now we're going to talk about how they're going to make another Uncharted, but I just feel like the more the first party's involved in this, the more nervous I get, because it's just resources taken away from vital first party single player games that are the heartbeat of PlayStation, in my opinion. And I feel like this was weird just because no one really cares what London Studio is doing, no offense. And so this would have been a big and surprising pop for a showcase or something like that. Imagine it the PlayStation Studios logo comes up and then it's the London Studio logo. I don't even know what it'd be like. What? That L, with the sacred symbols in it. And they show this game. I think that would have been way cooler than this. So that's why you only get one first impression, I think. And though it can override, the second impression can override and be this amazing thing, I'm a person that wants to show and tell, not just tell. And I can't relate to this idea. So I don't know quite what the point was. It could be a hiring thing. It could be something else, but it could be they're afraid it was going to leak. It's interesting to see about the Soho engine as well. We have this idea, and I think it's probably true, especially with Sony's financial investment in Epic, that Sony is looking to get onto more non-proprietary engines and just use the ecosystem of middleware and support structures that exist for them, as opposed to putting their own resources in. And we thought that maybe Decima was the only game that would not do this. And we saw from that leak that multiple games are running on Decima, including that Ballistic Moon game and others, that like survival horror game or whatever that they're working on. So Decima's working, but now there is another proprietary engine being entered into the mix. And I wonder if this engine is more for games as a service and somehow built into that. Again, reminding people what I just brought up, which is that the Soho engine was trademarked as a name in 2021, and we reported it. And at the time, I mean, because I mentioned this in passing, but for old school PlayStation fans, Soho invokes The Getaway because it was made by a team called Team Soho, which was this pre-Sony London incubation team. And that's where all of this comes from. And some of them went to Psygnosis, which became, Liverpool and all of the rest. So it's just, there's a confusing situation over there about where these things come from, but they're invoking that old school name, which I think is kind of cool. And
yeah,
I continue to hope that there is a Getaway. That was kind of maybe what I was hoping for London to be working on, was an actual Getaway game. Like, why, if you want to chase this game as a service trend, then why not chase the holy grail of them all and get involved with the Grand Theft Auto competitor? Maybe it's too scary to do. Maybe it's not worth it, but I think it would be worth it. I think PlayStation fans are sufficient enough in number to be really excited about something like that and actually play and support it. But we'll see what happens. I thought the article was strange, obviously planted and sourced. So go check it out if you like on gamesindustry.biz. Again, it's called, what is it called? Why PlayStation London Studio is leaving VR to create a fantasy online combat game.
Yeah. One thing I will say before we move on, I do think it's fascinating that they're working on a new proprietary engine at a time when most people are abandoning theirs. The fact that like CD Projekt Red is abandoning Red Engine to go for Unreal 5, and it's happening generally industry wide. So it's interesting to have Sony kind of craft this new specific engine, presumably for live service, because that does make the most sense. I just found that kind of interesting.
No, it definitely is. I wouldn't have expected it either, but it's well, I'll be very interested to see what happens with. Oh, I have a sneeze coming on.
Cool.
Excuse me.
There it is.
Thank you. Oh, you didn't even say bless you. I'm sorry. I just said thank you.
I just acknowledged it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, look at that.
But how do you feel about bless you?
I feel like I don't have the authority.
That's a good point.
Oh.
Now, you had that answer quick. I was impressed with that.
I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah. It is weird that we say it, because I always say God bless you to people, and then I get annoyed in my mind when they don't say thank you or acknowledge it. But then I'm like, why am I putting you? What is this? This is like ancient shit we're doing here. Why are we saying this?
You should say instead, you're so good looking.
Yeah, there we go. We were missing our Seinfeld reference for the episode. Yeah. Now that's satiated.
Yeah, we got it. Quota met.
All right. Let's go on to number 2. On this show, we've long contended that Sony's best weapon to fight back against its competitors is to double down on its own culture and found new studios. And according to a new publicly posted job listing, well, that may be happening as we speak in Southern California. According to this listing in part, quote, Sony PlayStation is building a new internal game development team in partnership with PlayStation Studios Visual Arts, an award-winning full production group that specializes in animation, motion capture, cinematics, art, and scanning. This is the same world-class team known for its contributions to the Last of Us franchise, end quote. So basically, Sony is incubating a new team that will work alongside the Visual Arts group, perhaps with its hands-on assistance. As we've discussed on this show, Visual Arts is the team that actually began developing The Last of Us Part 1 itself before Naughty Dog took over, and it was founded and long led by recent Sacred Symbols Plus guest Michael Mumbauer, who has since partnered with longtime Ben Studio lead Sean Garvin on a new studio called Lethos. Visual Arts has had its hands on a lot of big games, think Spider-Man and others, but it's a support team first and foremost. This team, on the other hand, will be working with someone else entirely. This listing continues, quote, this high-visibility project is being developed in collaboration with Naughty Dog. Though currently unannounced, we have a clear vision and plan to release. Using our existing expertise and premiere talent, we will guarantee a high visual quality bar for the game and a compelling experience for our players, end quote. This hire is for someone with a lot of experience, and, quote, as the ideal candidate, you will be proficient in all aspects of AAA game production and management. You are an organized and attentive leader, strategic and thoughtful in all interactions with both internal and external partners. Most importantly, your experience will guide the team's cultural growth and abilities, end quote. Otherwise, we are left to wonder just what the nature of this team is, where they will be housed, what they will be called, and most importantly, what they're working on. Many think it could be The Last of Us' faction spinoff, but it's highly unlikely, as that game is technically already announced and has been in development for several years. It's more likely that this is the continuation of Uncharted, though that this is also speculative at this point. Dustin, I obviously think this is Uncharted. I don't know why else you would say it was in conjunction with Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog has no interest in being second fiddle or co-fiddle to anybody on an original project. So, but in the reverse, if someone else is handling Uncharted, you need to make sure to support and invoke Naughty Dog's name to get its full due with the audience, which is vital to its success. I've long said that Uncharted 4, and it's not a spoiler, it's just Uncharted 4 ends in a way that makes what they can do next completely obvious. Blatantly obvious. And exciting. And I'm down with it. I love Uncharted. And I think it's been gone long enough where by the time this game comes out, we could be looking at 10 years between Uncharted games, and I think that's fine. That's totally fine with me. So what do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Crying Jim right now. He's crying, oh, they're making another Uncharted movie. We need a game. You gotta do that synergy. So this is what he does. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm also serious in that Sony is very intentional right now about making sure they have products lined up for their movie or TV based projects. And it's clear that they're going to do another Uncharted movie. For the last Uncharted movie, that's when they had the Legacy of Thieves collection come out. That was kind of the tie-in product. We've heard about the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, remake, whatever. We've talked about that to death, but that's probably going to be in conjunction with the Netflix show. And you'd have to imagine that when Ghost of Tsushima hits, they're going to have the sequel around that time as well. So it would make sense that they want to already lay the groundwork for a new Uncharted product. But who knows? Maybe it's something else entirely. But I think that makes a lot of sense. But overall, I think it's good to see them growing a studio internally. We've talked about that a lot on the show, instead of just going out and buying teams, trying to, buy your way into different things, to grow it yourself with your own culture and picking the very best people from the get-go. I think that's an exciting thing. So hopefully this team makes something awesome.
I think, Michael Mumbauer, I don't know exactly what the nature of his leaving Sony was when he went to found That's No Moon or whatever the hell that studio is called, that we don't really know anything about still, before he founded Lethos. But he was the head of visual arts basically the entire time it existed up to that point. And it's clear that they had, as far as I'm concerned, they had The Last of Us Part 1 somehow taken away from them. But close Naughty Dog connections and intertwined kind of things, and they did a lot of the mocap, I think, and some of the animation services and all of that, as they were trying to get more of that stuff internal as opposed to hiring external for hire teams. So I say that only because I think they kind of have a little bit of Naughty Dog DNA, and so spinning them off into another Naughty Dog team, I think, would be fairly interesting. And Chris, that's why I wanted to throw it over to you. It would be compelling for Naughty Dog to just have another studio. I don't know. They're already in LA. They're in Santa Monica. It's unclear. I think Visual Arts is in San Diego. So you would probably be able to hire. Well, you definitely would be able to hire from a whole new group of people. That's totally far away. No one would live in one place and work in the other. So what do you think about them kind of joining the likes of Polyphony and Insomniac having multiple, and Firesprite having multiple locations? Maybe that is what the studio will become, is just Naughty Dog South or whatever, which I think is what they were referred to when they were making The Last of Us.
Yeah, I think. I'm. That's compelling to me. I think it's a good idea. It would allow Naughty Dog to remain unencumbered, but still allow the team to kind of maybe have a consistent, or not consistent, but maybe more frequent output than they are currently having, because that has been a notable, I don't know if you would call it a weakness necessarily, but it's definitely noticeable how, when you compare Naughty Dog to Insomniac, especially, Insomniac's output's insane, and it's largely because they have that support. And, it would be cool to see that kind of output from Naughty Dog in a way that would allow them to hire from a new set of people, have them give them access to that reservoir of talent and that reservoir of knowledge. I think that'd be cool. I think it's a way better solution than just hiring more people at Naughty Dog. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a way smarter solution to the problem. Sometimes the solution isn't necessarily like expanding or like hiring more people, but sometimes maybe like just getting more people elsewhere to kind of work in tandem. And I think that's highly compelling. I do think it's Uncharted, by the way.
I think it's gotta be.
I can't imagine it be anything else.
Uncarded.
Uncarded, yes!
We'll
finally get it. It's time. We've waited so long. Can you imagine? Nah, we've waited too long. That's kind of the thing where it's like, it's been presumably, when was Uncharted 4? 2016?
2016, yeah.
So it'll be probably about 7, 8, 9 years before we see this thing. that's too long to wait for Uncharted for it to come back as Uncharted.
Yeah.
But I still would love that. The selfish part of me wants that.
I feel like it's so funny that they didn't do something like that when in an era where they might have, which was probably the PS3 into the PS4 era, where you could have imagined they would go hire some studio to make Uncharted and just do something stupid and funny, just some throwaway game. But they obviously don't do anything like that anymore. I think it's totally appropriate to bring Uncharted back to begin thinking about that. Uncharted is a pillar of PlayStation, and it's very similar to God of War, where I feel like you have to kind of have it activated in some way every so often. Gran Turismo, the same way. I just think there are certain franchises that don't necessarily have to go away forever. They just have to go away for a while, and they've done a good job of resting that series and not shoving it down anyone's throats. And there's a lot that they can do in preparation for a new Uncharted game, including remaking, and we're going to talk about another game that's maybe going to be remade in a little while, but remaking the first 3 games, which I think would be appropriate by the time these games come out. I totally think you can justify that. And I think that would be a huge lift, but something totally worth doing. And there's still no port of Golden Abyss off of Vita. And I just think that that's a thing you have to do too. Although they might Arkham Origins that game into oblivion and just pretend it never existed at all. I'm shocked that game has never been ported off of Vita, because it is pretty good. And it's an Uncharted game. I just don't understand how you're going to keep it there, but they don't really seem to give a shit.
It's I think it's stranded there forever. You're never going to see that. But I will say, like, we joke about Uncharted and all that stuff, but I mean, I would be all over that shit. I think especially like, and you know what? Here's my compromise to Naughty Dog. I don't want to see Last of Us 3, but you can do it if you make The Fast of Us afterwards. I think that is the only way that I will endorse that. You have to do it. Have fun again.
That would be so funny, man, to do something like that.
It would be so fun. That would be beyond hilarious.
Like a post-apocalyptic racer of some sort.
You could have different skins. You could have bashed in head Joel as one of the skins.
All right, we'll see what Visual Arts turns into, or not Visual Arts, but the team accompanying them. Seems likely that maybe there'll be a Naughty Dog satellite. Could be worth it. Naughty Dog name carries a lot of weight. You don't want to dilute it. I think that would be the only thing you'd be concerned about, but that might not matter. So we'll see. All right, number 3. Sony wasn't kidding when it said it was going to begin flooding retail with PlayStation 5 consoles. With word that many people are able to find them both in person and online, even seeing them in numbers in the wild, we get confirmation that the increase in production has paid off. In September here in the United States, PlayStation 5 was the country's best-selling gaming hardware. It's also selling briskly around the world. Sony hasn't updated sales numbers since midsummer, however. It's assumed the console is hovering around 30 million units sold at this point. For those interested in how The Last of Us Part 1 performed, it came in 5th place in the cumulative sales charts for retail and digital, falling behind a trio of sports games, FIFA 23, Madden NFL 23, and NBA 2K23, as well as Nintendo's Splatoon 3. However, there are a few notable entries elsewhere on the charts. For starters, the TMNT Cowabunga collection from Konami was somehow the 6th best-selling game of the month in the US. Saints Row slotted 7, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle slotted 8th, and first-party games Spider-Man, Horizon Forbidden West, and MLB The Show 22 came in 12th, 16th, and 19th, respectively. Elden Ring remains 2022's best-selling game in the United States, followed by Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga in 2nd. Horizon Forbidden West is the 5th best-selling game of 2022 so far. MLB The Show 22 is 6th, Gran Turismo 7 is 8th, and Miles Morales is 18th. Saints Row is somehow 15th on the list. When limited only to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games sold in the US at retail and digitally, the top 10 for September looks like this. FIFA 23, Madden NFL 23, NBA 2K23, The Last of Us Part 1, Saints Row, TMNT The Cowabunga Collection, Elden Ring, Horizon Forbidden West, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle, and Gran Turismo 7. Dustin, what do you think of those charts? First of all, your beloved Elden Ring, just outclassing everything in the sales charts cumulatively, still in the top 10 for PlayStations sold and top 20 for cumulative across platforms. I'm interested in this quiet buzzing of Sony's first-party games. Horizon Forbidden West is doing really well. It's one of the best-selling games of the year. Gran Turismo 7, which I feel like no one is talking about, is one of the best-selling games of the year. MLB The Show 22, explicitly not counting Game Pass, is one of the best-selling games of 2022. And then, of course, we see the triumvirate of September/October sports games. that outsell everything in the form of FIFA, Madden, and NBA. And I'm surprised to see FIFA above Madden in the US for the month as well. So any thoughts?
Yeah, part of, I would say, Horizon, and this isn't discrediting it, but it was bundled in. And that was like, if a lot of times if you would go to PlayStation Direct, the non-bundled version would always go first. And so a lot of people, I think, just bought that bundle. And maybe they played the game and enjoyed it. Maybe they didn't. But so that's probably part of it. But it's been interesting in particular. You started the story talking about PlayStation 5 kind of flooding the market now. And I'm seeing people tweet about this, or people in our Facebook group or other Facebook groups I'm a part of posting images of PlayStation 5 appearing in stores. It is beginning for the holiday season. So if you're thinking about getting one of these as a gift or want one for yourself, I mean, now if you see it, I would say buy it, because as people start to think about the holidays, I'm assuming that even though they are going to be on shelves, they are still going to probably go pretty fast. And cool to see TMNT. Obviously, that's a series that
killing it.
That's a series that obviously Shredder's Revenge was huge, but even the collection, TMNT is just a juggernaut franchise on there. And then the last thing I'll just say is this JoJo game is surprising me. It really shouldn't, because anime games always do well. This isn't, I don't want to say it's a bad fighting game, but it's not a particularly remarkable one. But it doesn't really seem to matter. People want JoJo content. They want stuff like that. They want anime games. And so this is one of them. And I'm glad to see it doing well, despite it being just fine, because JoJo is good. Watch it.
Chris, what do you think? Anything to add here? It's Saints Row, the 15th best-selling game in the United States in 2022 already.
Yeah, man. Massive success. I don't know, man. I think it's interesting. Obviously, these are not all of these games are bad by any means, but I think it does sort of speak to just kind of just how this year has been a little bit weird. I mean, TMNT, not to discredit TMNT at all, because it's a great game, but it's definitely not a game that you would expect to see in the top 15. And I don't think in a more stacked year you'd see it in this place. You know what I mean? I think because it is such a niche, it's such a specific thing. And I think, maybe more people are willing to give it a shot because there's so little out there. And, I think maybe people are falling in love with it. And I think that's really awesome because it is a style of game that is underserved, especially, in, modern generations. So I think that's really the big takeaway for me is just seeing TMNT kind of killing it in a way that I didn't expect. Again, not as a condemnation of its quality, but just as a surprise. That's just surprising to see it do that well. Yeah,
it's interesting to see a Konami game in the charts at all these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would love to see more of that. And as far as, what's doing well, I think what you speak to, this phenomenon of there being a dearth of games, I think has benefited many titles this year. I think The Quarry is probably the biggest example of a game that sold really well, I think, compared to probably what it would have if it came out at a different time. So we see a lot of those here. Of course, Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, I just found it so eye-wateringly boring. Where I think Maddie was the one that said I was playing the wrong ones, but I was trying to go in order. I think I got to episode 2. I just can't do it. It's I'm glad if people are enjoying it. It's no surprise that it sold really well. I was excited about it, but it's pretty bad in my opinion. All right. Number 4. It looks like we're getting yet another remake, but this one actually makes sense. Polish developer and publisher CD Projekt have revealed that the Witcher Remake is currently in development, a remake of the studio's very first game, 2007's The Witcher. Based on the Polish fantasy novel series, the original Witcher game is difficult to play for most. It's not only old, but it's also never been released anywhere but on PC, and it could really, really use an overhaul. One is coming, according to a press release from CD Projekt, which noted that it was being built in Unreal Engine 5. You may recall a couple of weeks ago when we delved deep into a series of CD Projekt related announcements, including new Witcher games, a Cyberpunk sequel, and more. Most of those games were given code names, and this game was actually in there. It's codenamed Canis Majoris. The Witcher Remake is under development elsewhere in Poland at an external team called Fool's Theory, quote, where veteran Witcher series staff are involved, end quote. Obviously, CD Projekt itself will be funding, producing, and shepherding the game, but don't get too excited. this game is nowhere near ready for prime time. Quote, it's still early and we want to ensure that the game is created with the utmost care and attention to detail. Therefore, while we're excited, to share the news with you, we want to ask you for your patience, as it will be a while until we start talking about this project in detail, end quote. So who and what is Fool's Theory, and why is it being trusted with such an important project? The team's biggest title comes in the form of 7 Enhanced Edition, a 2017 PC isometric action RPG that came to PlayStation 4 in 2019. It has largely been relegated to support work otherwise, though on some pretty big games. It worked on Belgian Team Larian Studio with Belgian Team Larian Studios on 2020's Baldur's Gate 3 and 2017's Divinity Original Sin 2, strategy adventure game Gord with Covenant, which is yet to be released, and even did some work in their own backyard, contracting with People Can Fly to help on 2021's excellent Outriders. As for the original Witcher, the 2007 PC launch saw an Enhanced Edition relaunch the following year, and while its 2011 sequel, The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, came to console, specifically Xbox 360, the original never did. Assuming this project comes to PlayStation, it'll be the only other mainline Witcher game actually available on Sony platforms, assuming nothing happens with The Witcher 2 in the interim. So the Late Nate wrote in and said, hey, CD player, with the announcement that there's a remake in the works for the first Witcher game, are we officially in the remake or remaster era of video games? Have we already been in it before, or for how long? Are more studios just going to make safe bets at this point, picking games that were already popular instead of taking a chance on a new idea? It's hard for me to be cynical, Nate, about this decision. The Witcher 3 is a mega game, massive. CD Projekt makes huge games, and I think it's peculiar that this game has been sealed away for years on PC in this old. They did an enhanced edition in 2008, but since then totally untouched. This would have been a more urgent thing for me to get this game ported, as well as Witcher 2. Getting Witcher 2 on PlayStation would have been an urgent thing for me at that time as well. And I think they realized the games were Eurojank and needed to be kind of sealed away until it can be dealt with, and now's the time. So I don't know, Dustin, let's start with you. It's hard for me to be too cynical about seeing The Witcher be remade. It's a 15-year-old game. By the time it comes out, it'll be more like 20 years. And I know we're being cynical about a lot of remakes, but a remake from this era is not really bothersome to me.
Yeah, I agree. I can understand that there could be a viewpoint of the worry of, are we just going to get more and more remakes since it's safer? You know, there's less groundwork, I guess, to do with something like that. You see this happening with movies right now, and I think that's kind of where a lot of this comes from. And I can understand that, and I agree. I don't want to see a world where we're getting mostly remakes. But at the same time, I think that it's not fair to compare movie remakes to game remakes. Just in that, I mean, first of all, it's a totally different medium, so it's incomparable. But just thinking about playing both the original Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake, both of them are excellent, but it feels like a totally different experience. Even games that are more faithfully remade, think of Shadow of the Colossus, something like that. It feels like almost something entirely new. And so the prospect of game remakes is just much more exciting to me than a movie remake, where it's kind of just watching something again with nicer, visual effects or something like, or think of like all the Disney live action remakes. It's like, what are we actually doing here? Maybe though there could be a reality where could be more interesting, but they're just so safe and they do the same stuff. It's just better because there's a real person in it surrounded by computer generated images, right? So Witcher 1, this game definitely looks like it. I'm watching gameplay of it now. This game kind of looks like ass. I'm not going to lie. It comes from this era where everything's kind of brown and muddy in the face. It's like the textures were kind of there and kind of not. So I'm really curious about what they'll be able to do with this.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I am a little bit more cynical generally, not of this, but because of the constant deluge of remakes. And I do think you have a point about video games being a little bit different. I still kind of am of the mind that anything from N64 and PS1 Like, I think those deserve remakes because a lot of that shit is just like borderline unplayable. It was like the introduction of 3D. A lot of it is just very, very jank, very, very. We've learned a lot since then, and we could make better versions of those games now that, you know, just deal with things a lot better and that are a lot more playable and a lot more approachable than they used to be. Even though I remember loving them when I was a kid, things change, and you know, I very much appreciated Crash Team Racing and the reignited trilogy from Spyro and Medieval, and I thought those were perfectly reasonable things. When you get into like Xbox, PS2, Xbox 360, PS3, it starts to get a little blurry for me. I still feel like a lot of those things are very good, but obviously with Resident Evil 4 remake looking as good as it does, like I'm all for that. The reason this makes a lot of sense to me is not only because it's an old game that looks really rough, but because, like we said earlier, it's just locked away off of certain platforms. It's exclusively a PC game, which is like weird. When a remake is done in this way, when it's like, hey, here's this game that's stranded on this platform, let's get it off that platform, and while we're doing it, let's just make it better. Let's just make it more modern. Let's like give it a bit of an overhaul. Let's give it a new coat of paint. It's hard for me to be cynical about that because that seems like not a labor of love necessarily, but it seems a project done with care, you know, like there's a reason beyond just to make money to do it, for preservation reasons. If not for that, then just for the nature, just being, it's always been weird to me that The Witcher 3 is this very, very popular game, but most people who have played it haven't touched the originals. You know, and to get those kind of back on track, and probably The Witcher 2 is probably going to be soon to follow after that. I think that's smart. I think it's cool. It's cool to get games more widely available, especially when they're stranded. It's something I wish PlayStation would do more with their stranded games. You know, so you know, I'm definitely not gonna get on CG Projekt Red's case for doing something that I wish other studios and entities were doing themselves.
Indeed. And we're going to talk about it later, more about the money in the industry, but I will say that there was a question asked in the inquiry from Nate here where he's saying, are publishers, and we touched on this a little bit, but are publishers going to continue to take low risk, medium to high reward bets? And the answer is yes, because we are contending once more with a situation where people don't necessarily want to pay money for games anymore. They want subscription services, they want free to play games, they want all these things. So in big investments in huge new IP and all of that requires buy-in that I don't think the audience is necessarily always prepared to give Elden Ring like support to. Although I'm sure Bandai Namco is making hand over fist money on Elden Ring. I can't imagine that game was very expensive to develop by Western standards at all. So good for them. And it reminds me a little bit of Control and all of that and how they made it on a budget too and did something special. But we're going to leave that for later in the show because I do think that that's an important component. But yeah, well, that is why it's happening in movies, and the money is the same in games. So all right,
you can make a lot of money with a notable IP. One thing I will say, I'm watching Witcher 1 gameplay. Geralt looks so fucking ugly, it's astounding.
That's what I'm saying, dude. It's like, damn.
I have never seen an uglier thing in my life. Like look up
You've
Witcher 1
things.
Geralt,
I'm looking now. Let's see Witcher 1 gameplay.
It's the very first one that comes up for me.
Patient
Yeah, those games were notable for having sex scenes in them. I wonder. I might have to look up some nudity from this game just to see how horrifying.
Oh my god, I can't even. That is so. I can't even. I don't even want to imagine
Let's
that.
see, Witcher 1 nudity.
Geralt looks emaciated. Geralt looks like he's emaciated.
Yeah, he looks like
he's unhealthy.
He looks like, you know what's funny? He looks like somebody dressed as him. You know what I mean? Like he looks like a programmer dressed as Geralt who hasn't eaten a vegetable in 5 years.
This is cool. I would dig. Why wouldn't this can totally be remade. This needs to be remade.
This desperately.
The sense of scale in this section is really strange too. Like the ceilings are massive. There's something. It's like when someone pointed out to me that the perspective of Killzone games are in your belt buckle, and when you walk up to like a dresser, you're like looking at the drawers, and I'm like, no. When I noticed that, it ruined everything for me. And what I'm thinking here in Witcher is that all the character models are a little too small. Okay.
That's funny.
Okay. Number 5. This was a weird one. In surprising news that may spell bad news for an eagerly anticipated upcoming AAA game, an important studio has lost its co-founders and leads. The team in question is the British studio Rocksteady, and word comes by way of a letter written to their official website, one written by David Haddad, the leader of all of WB Interactive Media, which also includes the likes of Avalanche Games, NetherRealm, Monolith, TT Games, and more. The news is bitter. Rocksteady, by far WB's most talented and important team, is losing its co-founders who also happen to be the team's studio and creative directors. Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker are, well, walking away. The letter says in part that, quote, with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League nearly finished, they have both decided to leave Rocksteady at the end of 2022 and will begin a new adventure in gaming, end quote. This leaves key vacancies, and we now know who will be taking over too. Longtime senior producer Nathan Burlow, who has been with Rocksteady since it was founded in 2004 and has worked on all of their games, starting as an associate producer, will take over as studio director. Jamie Walker's old role, while the creative director role vacated by Sefton Hill will be filled by Darius Sadigian, who is being brought in from the outside, particularly from Sega, though he did have a stint at Rocksteady in the past. The loss of Walker and Hill cannot be understated. While they founded Rocksteady together, it's important to note that they actually worked together before that, at a studio some people might remember called Argonaut. They actually led that team together for a time too before it went defunct, so they have a lot of experience together as a production and directorial unit. It means they will have great power at their new studio, whatever it is, to not only court talent, but to court talent from Rocksteady, very similar to what it did to Argonaut. So it's something to keep an eye on. As for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League itself, it's unlikely there's much to be worried about. The PlayStation 5 game is still slated for an early to mid-2023 release, and will be the first AAA game from the studio since its renowned 2015 PlayStation 4 game Batman Arkham Knight. It was first revealed in 2020 following several years of rumors that pegged Rocksteady as not only working on this game, but perhaps even a Superman game as well, one that never came to fruition. So people wrote in about this, and there are two different ways that we can tackle this that are interrelated. We have to talk about the game, and then we have to talk about the studio. So let's talk about the game first. Philip wrote in and said, "Hi, Sacred Squad. With the co-founders of Rocksteady leaving the studio, does this ring alarm bells for the studio in the upcoming Suicide Squad game? Thanks for the great content." So, Chris, let's go to you first. My instincts here, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. It seems quite cordial. If they're staying through the end of the year, it seems like the game is certainly playable, certainly going to be pretty much close to done at that point, and their names are going to be on it, so I don't think they want to have a bad product and an adversarial relationship going out the door, Metal Gear Solid 5 style. So I don't think anything bad is going to happen with the game. I'm curious what your take is from their exit in terms of the near term, which is the release of Suicide Squad. I will say, when we did Sacred Symbols Across Defining Duke, which you can listen to on Patreon right now if you're a Patreon supporter, I did note that my esteem of Rocksteady has gone up since Gotham Knights has come out, and since those damning comparison videos between it and Arkham Knight are shown in this 7-year-old game is just infinitely more impressive in every way. So
yeah,
a lot riding on this game. I'm just curious what you thought about their exit.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I'm definitely concerned about Rocksteady in the future. You know, like I don't know if Rocksteady themselves after Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will, because that's kind of a big loss, man. Like your creative leads and, you know, co-founders leaving. That's never. It's not that they can't recover from that, but there's no doubt going to be people who are going to follow them, you know? So I think Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will still come out good, and I'm still looking forward to it. I have a pretty good amount of faith in it for whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe that's just the goodwill that Rocksteady has brought up with me, because I personally have just never disliked anything they've done. Granted, they have been doing the same thing for a while, so that's also, you know, potential wrench in the gears. But I loved Arkham Knight when it came out. Like, I didn't actually have any problems with it at all. Like, I didn't like the things that everybody didn't like about it. Like, oh, you have to use the Batmobile too much. Like, that was obviously annoying. But I thought it was a stellar game. Like, I thought it looked really gorgeous. I thought the story was cool, if a little bit predictable, especially if you know Batman lore. But, you know, it was a fun ride, and I love the way they utilized Mark Hamill, like the Joker in that game. It was like really, really cool. So I think they're a really creative studio. I think they're really creative guys, and I'm looking forward to what they're going to do after this. And I think Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is still going to come out to be a pretty solid title. I'm not worried about the game, but, you know, that's a big loss for the studio going forward. And I do wonder how it's going to affect the trajectory of what they're going to work on next, or whether or not this was indicative of maybe the fact that maybe they see themselves in Rocksteady as kind of in this rut of being stuck with DC. Like, I feel like that might be part of it. Like, maybe it's like,
I would think something like that would be very fun and cool for a while, and then really exhausting after a while.
Because there's no doubt that Rocksteady, given their great output, is probably going to continue to be courted for DC or like superhero or like licensed games in the future, because they do such a good job with them. And
just by virtue of their relationship with Warner Brothers, you know.
Just by virtue of their relationship with Warner Brothers and their just general talent level. And you have to assume it's like, well, cool, but we'd like to own something. And maybe that's what they're kind of going for. Maybe they want to just free themselves from those shackles. As cool as much benefit as those shackles have brought them, I think they maybe just want to try something else. And it would make more sense for them to just leave the studio and start something new, and allow Rocksteady as it exists to continue doing that, so that they have the same, you know, pedigree from the outside, and they can continue doing something else with that same kind of goodwill brought with them.
And to piggyback off what you're saying, Chris, because it was along the same lines of what I was thinking, is that now is around the time where they're going to start pre-production on the next product. They're probably polishing up Suicide Squad. And so leadership is trying to figure out what to do next. And this pure speculation, but there may be a disconnect between what they want to do and what WB wants them to do. And they've been their star developer for many years, as you mentioned, about working on Batman games and now the Suicide Squad game. And maybe they don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's totally reasonable. And maybe they just came to an impasse with WB where they said, no, you will make Suicide Squad 2, or you will make a follow-up to Arkham. And they're like, okay, well, we're out.
It could have something. It could have something to do also with the fact that like Warner Brothers is in the middle of like this weird shit right now.
It might be safer for them to get out now.
Yeah, they're just like, let's you know, we'll make good on our promise, but let's book it.
I think that there is something to that. I think that's really a good observation, because what I was going to say was, people have to remember Rocksteady was an independent studio. After Batman Arkham Asylum came out, and after Arkham City was greenlit and already in development, then they were purchased by WB outright. That was 12 years ago. These guys, Jamie Walker and Sefton Hill, have been long vested and were made millionaires from that development. Now, I think that this is relevant because they've been there so long, and even if there was a game deal where it's like you have to stay for 2 games or you have to stay for 7 years to get your money or whatever it is, they're certainly out of that window now. And I would look at it and be like, what the fuck are we doing here for? Let's go do it again. I mean, that's what everyone has done. You know, look at Infinity Ward to Respawn. I would imagine that's going to happen again with some of those guys at some point. And the reason you do it is because you can seize control of the operation, grab your own money, and then just seed an outfit to sell again. And look at what's going. A lot of the same people that funded Infinity Ward funded Respawn, and they made first party money twice. While they really could have stayed there and made a very comfortable salary, high 6 figures, low 7 figure salary as the head of one of these studios, but you can make much more than that if you go out, and they've done it, so they know what they're doing. So I would think that it's probably a combination of the shit with Discovery and Warner Brothers is really hectic, where they're just like taking all these $1 billion write-offs and writing entire projects off. It's probably not a great situation to be in. WB is already courted buyers for these studios anyway, so they might not be there long term. They might have their ear to the ground and understand that this is ephemeral in some way. And I also think it is the WB DC connection. It's hard to like remove yourself from that, and it would be stupid for them to allow them to do something else when they're selling so many games doing this one thing. It would be like NetherRealm not making Mortal Kombat anymore. You just can't.
Yeah,
I don't think so. You can't just not make Mortal Kombat. You can make other things, but you have to make this too. And I would imagine that there might be a little acrimony behind the scenes, simply as far as how long this game took to make.
It's a good point.
It's an insane amount of time. And it'll be about, I'm sure they got games into pre-production, a lot of rumors about after what happened with Arkham Knight, and then of course Arkham VR and all of that. But I would say 5+ years is being generous about how long this game has taken them, and that's too long. And so there might, both sides might be like, fine, whatever. And so I think there's a lot to it. But if I were them and I knew what happened and how much money I made, I don't know how much money they made when they were purchased. It's like, well, we could probably poach half this team and just go do it again and sell the fucking team to Take-Two or something. So I think there's a lot to it. But Chris, this next one, I want to read, and it's for you. A recent trademark from Japanese mega publisher Square Enix indicates that its vaunted Parasite Eve franchise may be returning. The trademark in question, acquired in Japan and relayed by website Gamatsu, invokes a central component of Parasite Eve lore and is simply called symbiogenesis. According to Wikipedia, this word represents the leading evolutionary theory of the origin of the eukaryotic cells from the prokaryotic organisms. I can never say those words.
Eukaryotic and prokaryotic.
Yeah, I can never say it. You can read them, but you can't. I can read them, but I can't say them. The first game, which came to the Japanese, and so that, as far as I understand, is the single cell organism and the multi-cell organism.
Yeah.
The first game, which came to Japanese PS, so I know a little bit of biology, just a little bit. The first game, which came to Japanese PS1s in 1998, deep in the Squaresoft days, was based on a Japanese novel from 1995 and was all about an NYPD officer trying to stop a demonic figure from transforming human genetics, forcing them to spontaneously combust. I'll talk about it in a minute. I loved this game. It can best be described as an action horror RPG. A sequel, Parasite Eve 2, followed on Western PS1s in 2000, and there was a random third game late in the PSP era, some might recall, a 2011 Western release simply called The Third Birthday. That particular game embraced a wholesale change to real third-person shooting while keeping true to its RPG roots. And since then, all has been quiet. Does this indicate Parasite Eve is about to return? Well, it sure seems like it does. And Logan wrote in and said, "Howdy, Sacred Boys. On the recent call-in show with Chris mentioned interest in Parasite Eve when asked about more obscure survival horror games. This week, I've seen news come out about Square Enix trademarking symbiogenesis, and people theorizing it's hinting at a return to the 1998 series. From what I understand, the author of the book Parasite Eve was inspired by, owns the copyright over the title Parasite Eve, so without his involvement, Square Enix is forced to use a different title. Is this another case of Chris willing things into existence? What do you guys think of the theory that Square Enix is returning to the series? Dustin and Chris mentioned in the call-in episode they aren't familiar with the game, but Colin, were you a fan of the series? As a huge fan of Parasite Eve 1 and 2, I've been praying for Parasite Eve to get the Final Fantasy VII treatment. Hope you guys have a great day, and thanks for all you do." So, Chris, you predicted, or at least set the stage for a Parasite Eve remake, is that right?
Dude, it was so funny. Like, it was like less than 24 hours, I'm pretty sure, after we recorded the show. We saw this. I think, Dustin, you texted me, right?
I added you on Twitter and I just said,
right,
bro, what the fuck? Because there was a Wario tweet pointing out this, and it's just like,
yeah, it's
what the hell?
I remember little bits of Parasite Eve because I had I can't remember, it was some family member, it was like a cousin or like a friend of the family who like had been playing, and I remember watching him play it. I didn't really understand what it was, and it came to my mind when somebody was like, "Oh, what's a good obscure horror game to be brought back now that survival horror is kind of coming back in full swing?" And I said, one of the first things that I thought of was Parasite Eve, just because, first of all, I just think it's a dope name. It's a shame they're not going to be able to use the name because that name is so fucking cool.
Yeah, it is.
But you know, I remember being enamored with it and never following up on it because I don't know. I think I was too scared back then. I didn't have the stomach for horror games until maybe like the middle of high school, to be honest. Like I was a big scaredy baby because Resident Evil 1 traumatized me because that first section with the zombie eating the guy in the hallway and he's like slowly turning around at you.
Yeah.
Looked exactly like the hallway in like the mezzanine of my building. And it just like I couldn't do it. So, I mean, it would be cool to see this back again. I know Colin has a lot more experience with it. So I'm
this game reminds me of Dagan, my brother. It came out in 1998, and I didn't own it at the time. So I was in 9th grade, and my brother was living in Connecticut working for some random Web 1.0 company as an animator. And he would come to Long Island and hang out every so often. And so when he came to Christmas, that 1998 Christmas was very memorable because I got a lot of great games that year for Christmas, and like Xenogears, Brave Fencer, Musashi. I just loved that holiday. And there were 2 or 3 games, and Metal Gear Solid. There were 2 or 3 games leading into the holiday though that my brother gave me, and one of them was Mega Man Legends, which we brought up. I got that for my birthday, and then Dagan came home for Christmas to hang out and brought Parasite Eve with him, which he had never played, and he picked up, and we played it together. And I remember being really scared of this game the first time I saw it. It's very much in the Resident Evil vein, but it's more of a realistic, grounded shooter in some way, and has some role-playing elements. As I recall, Aya is the main character or something like that, and she's a cop, but she's in a gown because she went to Carnegie Hall for some sort of musical event, and it's late in the year. I think it might be New Year's Eve or something, and all the shit goes down while she's out there, so she's all alone dealing with this problem. And it's super cool. It's a really cool, creepy, atmospheric game. I don't know. I haven't played it since that era, and I don't know how well it holds up. I know a lot of people really liked The Third Birthday. I think we gave it a pretty good review at IGN, as I recall. But it's been a while, and I was a little put off by it because I wasn't super into more shooty type games. And, you see things in the menu like an M4 or a Desert Eagle or whatever. I'm like, this sucks. I mean, that was kind of like my mentality when I was a kid. I would rather play with swords and shields and all that kind of stuff. So that really put me off. But yeah, I would love to see this come back. In fact, that famous, well, it's not famous, I guess, but the Parasite Eve logo, which is like the P and the E with the circle around it. I had a full page thing out of PlayStation Magazine, and I had it on my door or whatever. So that's memorable for me too. That was there like throughout high school. So Dustin, what do you think about this? The return of Parasite Eve? Anything to add?
Yeah, both of these games I see all the time at conventions, and it's part of my quest to acquire all of the great PlayStation 1 RPGs. And this is, I'm putting it in that category since it's Squaresoft and it has, RPG elements, and the prices on these, it's not horrible. I mean, a complete price, $60 for the first one, $120 for the second one. So they're definitely up there. But I want to get them at some point and play the originals. But it was just weirdly, I mean, on top of the situation with Chris and the Colin, that was weird. But also just in my discovering about a lot of these PS1 games I missed out on, this is one that has had my interest for the past 6 months or so of wanting to check out. And now this news pops up again. And it would make sense that Square Enix would want a piece of the survival horror resurgence going on right now. They have an IP for it that's been dormant for a while that people have fond memories of. Everyone else is bringing out their IPs again with Dead Space, Alone in the Dark, Resident Evil 4, of course. So yeah, it would make sense that they would want in on that. And it seems like Parasite Eve is the right IP to do it with.
Really memorable game. Chris, you might like to look at the intro too, just because it takes place in New York City. So there's a really memorable intro with the Statue of Liberty, and I think it's
I remember,
and it's pretty cool. I remember, and the Squaresoft logo is there, the old Squaresoft logo in the beginning. It was so different for a Squaresoft game. That wasn't what they were really doing. You can tell that they were being influenced by Capcom for sure, and that was the result. So I don't even remember the sequel. I don't even know if I played it. I probably had it, but I don't really even remember.
It's a pretty good looking Statue of Liberty too, to be fair. Like it's not, it's for PS1, that's pretty good. I remember specifically this sequence with the transforming rat that like I can't do it. I was like, it's fucking me up. I don't like this.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. Yeah, the Twin Towers are in here too. There they are. So interesting. Yeah, this is so memorable, dude. Yeah, I would I'm sure it plays like shit, but I would love for them to redo those at some point. Maybe that's what this is. That would be nice. Yeah. That would be the first step, is maybe we're talking about remakes, and I know it's old, but it's a remake. I don't think we need a new Parasite Eve, or reimagine it. Yeah. Do it again.
I will say though, try and get that name. Try and get that, like try and figure out some way to get that, because like, I'm sorry, it's just such a dope name. Like it's just too cool. It's too cool to be sitting there, like not being used in this way. If you're really gonna bring it back, you gotta talk to the guy, work something out.
Yeah, I'm looking at least in the United States who owns this. There are 2 live trademarks. Let's see. Paper cardboard inking ribbons for computer printers. So this is not, I don't know what the hell that is. And then, yeah, Parasite Eve live from 2002, a trademark. that's still alive for a video game that was filed in February of 1998 and last updated in 2002 for the original game. So they own that. Yeah, who knows?
You got to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right. Let's move on to, where are we here? Number 7. As they do each month, Sony has revealed the games that will be available to all PlayStation Plus subscribers for the month of November. Specifically, the following games will be available to PS Plus Essential subs, the lowest tier, which therefore includes everyone with PS Plus, and these games will become available as soon as the calendar turns over on November 1st. The biggest game of the bunch is no doubt Nioh 2, the PlayStation console exclusive Dark Souls-like game from Koei Tecmo-owned developer Team Ninja. Nioh 2 launched in 2020 on PS4 and came to PlayStation 5 the following year, and both versions of the game will be available depending on which hardware you're employing. The series just surpassed 7 million units sold, by the way. I saw that this morning, so I added it to the story. Meanwhile, over on PlayStation 4, the 2016 release, the LEGO Harry Potter collection, will also be made available. This is, of course, a combination of 2 PS3-era LEGO games, LEGO Harry Potter Years 1 through 4 from 2010 and LEGO Harry Potter Years 5 through 7 from 2011. And finally, for both PS4 and PS5, players will gain access to a physics game called Heavenly Bodies from developer 2 Point Interactive. It first launched in 2021. Though most of you will be hearing this after the fact, you do have until the last minutes of October, the last day, to grab that month's so-called free games if you're interested, so go get them if you'd like. Dustin, anything speak to you here?
I know a lot of people are huge fans of Nioh 2. Maddie in particular really, really loves this game. Not necessarily for me, just because there's a lot of loot in this game, a lot of loot management, which is just not really my thing. But Lego Harry Potter, that's a cool get as well. I've never played those, but yeah. So both neat choices. Nioh 2 is definitely probably the star.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree. I've never really been one for the Lego games. I just didn't grow up with them in any real meaningful context. So I'll still add them though. So
yeah, you never know if you'll change your mind. I feel like I platinumed a Lego Harry Potter game on Vita. I might be wrong about that, but some random Lego Harry Potter game. But it's nice I should have probably wrote it in there. It's a nice little kind of lead up to get you in the mood for Hogwarts Legacy next year. Yeah. So there's that as well. But yeah, pretty underwhelming for me. Nioh 2 is way too hard for me. I'm not even going to bother. Nioh made me want to smash my head into a wall. It was so, I tried so hard. It was when I was living at my mom's for a little while when I was waiting for the house to be built, and I was going to die. I just didn't know what to do. I just tried. I wasn't going to die. I did die over and over and over. And over and over and over and over again. Just like when I played Elden Ring. Just do not have it in me. Speaking of those kinds of games, number 8. 2023 is absolutely chock full of AAA games, but one of the low-key, most anticipated ones of them all is the Koei Tecmo published Team Ninja developed action RPG, Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. Tacitly revealed in 2021 and fully revealed early this year, Wo Long is coming to both PS4 and PS5. Though not totally reduced to the genre, Wo Long is a Souls-like game, meaning that it's predicated on exacting combat and brutal difficulty. What makes it notable amongst its peers, however, is its subject matter, the Three Kingdoms period of Chinese history, which has long been mined by fellow Koei Tecmo-owned studio Omega Force in its various so-called Musou titles. And this isn't Team Ninja's first foray into this type of game, far from it. The aforementioned Nioh games from 2017 and 2020 are similar games steeped in Japanese history, and From Software, the progenitors of the Souls-like genre, are of course being copied by many, many others as well. Chris, what's your feeling on Wo Long Fallen Dynasty? I know this game will be on Game Pass, by the way, if you're an Xbox player, so something to look forward to over there as well. But are you interested in this game? This seems like a more generalized, Koei Tecmo-driven way to make a little bit more money on a Nioh, which they kind of had to split with Sony. So, yeah,
I mean, I like the look of it. It does look cool, but generally speaking, I'm just so bad at these kinds of games. Like Nioh, I tried a little bit of Nioh, and to the point where I just didn't even bother really publicizing the fact that I tried it, because I was just like, it's not that I wasn't gelling with it. It's more just like I was just like, I was very, very well aware that it's like I can't do this. I just understood my limits at that moment. But this looks a little bit more approachable. There's something cool about it. I like the way it looks, but it also kind of looks like I don't want to say that we have too many of these kind of third-person Japan games. But they are starting to kind of blend together a little bit. And for me, the one that I'm a little bit more interested in is that Rise of the Ronin. Just because I feel like it made more of an impression on me. It looked a little bit more different. It looked a little bit more unique. It looked a little bit more stylish. So of the big ones that are yet to arrive, that's the one that I'm kind of keeping more of an eye on. This one I'm definitely curious enough. And if it's on Game Pass, there's no reason for me not to check it out. So I'm sure I will play it. But I'm a little bit... I don't know. I'm a little bit lukewarm on Wo Long, to be honest. I know. Isn't there like a demo? Wasn't there a demo available? Am I crazy?
There was like a beta thing, but it's been long over. I think with Neo, they they might have done multiple, so you may have another chance to check it out.
Yeah, maybe I'll check it out the next time. A lot of these are starting to blend together, and I love these. By the way, I really enjoyed Ghost of Tsushima. I really liked Sekiro. Obviously, Rise of the Ronin looks cool, but we're starting to get into that territory of like how many more of these can we put? Like, how much room do we have for these? I didn't bother with Neo 1 or Neo 2. I mean, but I don't know. It's I'm so bad at these.
What do you think, Dustin? Are you interested in this game? I will ask you this. Like, one of the things I wonder, because you're such a FromSoft fan, is, and now we have this with them too, with Neo, Ronin, and this game all in development kind of at the same time, is what even differentiates your games from each other if you're developing these games just one on top of the other, and just all these different franchises? What the fuck? What is it even? You know what I mean? I agree with Chris where it just seems a little bit weird. What's different from Bloodborne and Demon Souls and Elden Ring? And spiritually, they all seem the same. And it's much less differentiated to me than it is like something like a Metroidvania would be. I can
answer that question from Software's games, but not so much with Team Ninja, just because, I mean, there's Neo 2, technically you could maybe put Stranger of Paradise in that same kind of lineage, and now this game, and then they have the open world game coming with the second party Sony game that, again, there's too many of these and I can't remember what it's called. Rise of the Ronin, right. So I'm not quite as sure. I was just looking at a headline from Eurogamer right now that says, if Neo was Team Ninja's Dark Souls, Wo Long Fallen Dynasty feels like it's Sekiro. So it seems like it's probably more aggressive gameplay, maybe more focused on sword-based combat, parrying, stuff like that. But I'm not sure. I'm curious. I played a tiny bit of the beta, but I think I ended up having to put it down, and then when I went to go back to it, it wasn't live anymore, so I really don't have any experience to speak on for this. But I'm curious how much it will change things up from Neo, or if it's going to carry some of the qualities that I personally don't like from it. So I really hope they do another beta thing. But I remember that when that beta was live, a lot of people really spoke highly of it. But it is interesting, Colin, you're talking about this idea of like what differentiates them, what makes them different. And it is interesting because they do all kind of have that same core. And like I said, my experience is mainly from the Software perspective. Like, to me, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro are very, very different games in that the core, which is of course the combat in those games, is just very different playstyles. And it's part of the reasons why I couldn't even really play Sekiro for the first few months that it was out. I was trying to play it like it was a Dark Souls game. It was just completely incompatible. So it's interesting to think about the design and how, those games all look very similar and they have the exact same kind of tenets of their gameplay. But when it comes down to the core of how you play it, they are very, very different.
Fair enough. We can move through these next two quickly as we round out the news. Number 9, in a piece of surprising, albeit welcome news, Microsoft-owned developer Bethesda Game Studios revealed that its 2015 open-world RPG Fallout 4, which came to PlayStation 4 that year, would be getting a re-release on PlayStation 5 as part of the 25th anniversary celebration for the Fallout franchise. While a new blog post on the official Fallout website focused primarily on their ongoing game-as-a-service Fallout 76 and even teased the upcoming live-action Fallout adaptation, there was a brief paragraph buried in there that Fallout 4 would come to PS5 in 2023 as a free update if you already own the game on PS4. The focus is on fidelity, 4K resolutions, higher frame rates, and more, plus lingering bug fixes and so on. While it's not the first time a Microsoft studio has released a game on the PlayStation's platform, or PlayStation platforms rather, the support is notable because simply because the willingness of the two sides to work together may be lessening. Still, Fallout 4 was the best-selling Fallout game, and millions of people played it on PS4, so there's good reason to take care of them. And while Fallout is technically 25 years old, Bethesda's work on the franchise goes back a little more than halfway through. 2008's Fallout 3, a seminal work, was their first foray into the series that began in 1997 by defunct developer Interplay and followed up by a sequel the next year, this time from defunct studio Black Isle. Interestingly, both Interplay and Black Isle have reconstituted in recent years, though neither are major players currently. As for Fallout 4, while the game sold exceptionally well, it wasn't a critical darling and didn't have the staying power nor respect that was garnered by the likes of not only Fallout 3, but the externally developed 2010 Fallout spinoff, New Vegas, created by sister Xbox team Obsidian. And in fact, Bethesda revealed recently in their own work that they were planning New Vegas as a DLC pack first.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to read and listen about how they were saying that they just gave them all of the assets, like every piece of asset from Fallout 3 to make the game. And it really does. It's incredible how quickly they made it in less than 3 years, I think. So we have that. Anyone interested in going back to Fallout 4? I must admit, this game, I think, was exposed by The Witcher 3 coming out 6 months beforehand. It's just no contest in terms of open world role-playing games. It felt so awkward and stiff. That's why I'm really hoping that they've figured out that what they need to do with Starfield, because I think that's doing the same kind of thing that's going to compare negatively to some of its contemporaries, like Cyberpunk, for instance. It could be bad news for them. So, Chris, do you have any interest in going back to Fallout 4 on the new consoles?
I actually, yes, because I've heard really, really good things about Far Harbor, but I've never actually gone and played it. And I've had many people tell me that Far Harbor is some of the best Fallout shit. That's
the one that's supposed to be in Maryland or something, right?
Yeah,
or
it's like I think it's the swamps of
Maine.
It's the swamps of Maine, and it's like it's
cool,
very, very interesting, and apparently it's like very, very highly praised. It's like a lot of people compare it to like it's like the New Vegas of Fallout 4. Obviously, it's developed by the same guy, so it's not exactly analogous, but I think, I think I might, honestly, because even back in the day, I didn't hate Fallout 4 as much as a lot of people did. Like, it's a very janky game. It's definitely not up to snuff with a lot of contemporaries at the time. But I'm of that mind where I just don't really play Bethesda games for the believability or the presentation necessarily. I play it because for whatever reason, even though Skyrim looks gray all the time, and even though there's only 5 voice actors in the whole fucking game, it's a really mesmerizing and enchanting experience for whatever reason. And they're really good at kind of doing that. They're very good at pulling off a lot with a little. And even though, Fallout 4 is a very misguided product, I think there's a lot that's wrong with it. I think that settlement shit is really annoying. I think the main story is really fucking terrible. I do think there's a lot of side stuff in that game that's really worth experiencing. I feel like I had so much fun doing that Silver Shroud quest back in the day. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff about Fallout 4, even though it's obviously the weaker, one of the weaker titles. And I don't know if I have much interest in going back through the original campaign again or playing the original bulk of the game. It would be nice to play Far Harbor with modern accoutrements. That'd be a really So I'm glad in a way that I've put it off a little bit, because this would no doubt be the ideal way to experience it anyway. So yeah, I probably will. I'm kind of in an RPG mode lately. I feel it coming on after I'm done with all my stealth games.
Yeah, Fallout 4. I remember so clearly when we got it. I still was getting games early at that time, and I was so excited. I was looking forward to this game so much. We knew it was coming. It was finally showed at E3 that year. And I remember just being in my bed in my apartment in San Francisco playing it, and I played it for about 25 hours that first time, and over time just being like, I'm just bored. There's something about this that doesn't resonate with me in 2015 like it did in 2008 or 2010. Because when Fallout 3, as I've remarked in the past, Fallout 3 melted me. I couldn't even believe Fallout 3. I was playing it on PlayStation 3, which wasn't a good port. And I beat it multiple times, which is rare for me to play a game multiple times like that. I loved it. And
that was me with Skyrim.
Yeah, it's just something about the experience of playing so many games in between now and then soured me on it. Again, that's why I'm so particularly interested in Starfield from an aesthetic point of view. I want to see what it really looks like, because I think that's the key. They know storytelling and characters, beat to beat stuff, drawing you to new locations, and the sense of discovery in their games is unrivaled. So they just need to join the new era. And that's why I was a little disappointed that Starfield seemed so big, because I felt like what made Fallout 3 special and Fallout 4 and New Vegas were just these kind of more limited geographic locations that were really dense. And
yeah,
I dug that. And then, like you said, you would go, when I said Maryland, that was the Fallout 3 DLC where you went to Maryland Point Lookout.
Yeah.
And so there was other things like that. Operation Anchorage, which was the VR training one where you were fighting the Chinese soldiers. There's so many.
The Pit also.
The Pit, right? Going to Pittsburgh,
Hometown.
right?
Yeah, it's
You
very
collect
cool.
gold ingots, I remember. I remember writing the guide for that, carefully going and getting all the screenshots of the gold ingots. So shout out to Fallout 4. Good to see that kind of support coming still. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think this will be the last time that we see these kinds of games come to PlayStation consoles as well. For instance, if they really... It's preposterous that they haven't remade Fallout 3. I don't know what the hell that's all about, but you have to assume if they do something like that, that would probably come to PlayStation. I don't know.
I would imagine.
That's just a guess. I have no fucking idea, to be perfectly honest with you. Okay.
I would imagine that it would.
And the final thing is, and I'm sure you guys have nothing to say about this, but I felt like I needed to point this out because it's so interesting. Number 10. This isn't important news by any stretch of the imagination, but it's interesting on multiple levels nonetheless. If you go to gunsupgame.com, the hub of the old PlayStation free-to-play game Guns Up, you'll find a message atop the page, quote, multiplayer and all online features for Guns Up will be terminated and no longer available starting April 14th, 2023. And you have to be online be online to play this game. This game will not be available or playable starting April 14th, 2023, end quote. 50,000 in-game gold currency will be distributed to all players in the coming weeks to mark the closure. So why is Guns Up relevant? Well, it's the last remaining vestige of a time when PlayStation did in fact try to create some free-to-play and games as a service fare. These games are often associated with early PSX conferences and range the gamut from the Jaffe-developed Drawn to Death to the ill-fated Sony San Diego-led Killstrain. But while Drawn to Death didn't make it to market until 2017 and Killstrain the year before in 2016, Guns Up was actually a very early, coming to PlayStation 4 in 2015 and migrating to PC in 2018 and mobile earlier this year. In other words, this game was alive and at least making some cash, and making it more interesting is that it was developed by Valkyrie Entertainment, which you might recall was purchased outright by Sony earlier this year to focus on their mobile and free-to-play initiatives, which Guns Up once represented. Originally announced for Vita as well as PS4, the handheld port was canceled during development, and as for what Valkyrie is working on these days, the Seattle-based team most recently contributed to the upcoming God of War Ragnarok from Sony Santa Monica. Previously, it worked for all sorts of companies, including with Xbox on Forza and on various Riot Games-related projects too. So nothing more to say about that game. I just thought that was interesting, making the rounds in more hardcore PlayStation spaces.
Yeah.
I remember playing Guns Up at E3 when I was still at IGN, and it was fine. It was an experiment, and it's interesting as we talk about the games as a service and these multiplayer games and all these things coming. Sony did try. It was just so half-hearted and tin-eared as far as the way they were going about it, and so it never worked. And Guns Up is the last game of that style. So if you want to get those trophies, you have 6 months to do so, starting now. All right, my friends. That's all for the news. Let's get into 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience, as we always do, to round things out. These are, of course, from Patreon. That's one of your perks. You can submit these on the thread that we put in the newsfeed each week for the show. We'll start with Travis Terry, who wrote in and said, "Hey, guys, new listener and Patreon subscriber here. Thanks to my friend Jordan for introducing me to the show." Nice. Welcome, Travis. Welcome. Just wanted your thoughts about a topic that's been on my mind for a bit. I found myself lately not completing games that I was really excited about when releasing due to another game catching my eye. Do you guys complete a game before moving on to the next one? Thanks again for all the great content, and keep up the great work. Travis, thank you for writing in. Dustin, where's your mind at with this conundrum here of not finishing games? How insistent are you on finishing the games you start?
It really depends. Just because, I don't know, as I've gotten older, I don't know, you start to view time in a different way. And I think we've talked about this on the show, where it's just you don't want to spend your time playing something you don't want to play. Games are about having fun and enjoying yourself. So if you start something and find that eventually you don't like it, I personally don't have any problem dropping it, or going with what's going to give you the most enjoyment at the current time. For example, I started and I was about 5 hours, maybe a little more, into Suikoden 2. And a bunch of other things came up that I really wanted to play. And so that's kind of fell to the backside. And eventually I'm going to go back to that game for sure. I know that I will definitely go back to that. But it's okay that it's sitting in the background and new stuff has caught my eye. There are certain things that I've picked up and put down and I know that I'm never going to go back to. And that's okay too. I don't know. I don't have that kind of completionist attitude to suffer and play something that I'm not enjoying. And I think that that's perfectly fine. Life is short. Play games you enjoy playing.
Chris, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel very similarly. Like, I mean, I've always felt this way, even when I was like a young kid. I just, my patience is not particularly high, and so when I'm playing a video game, I feel like it's the game's job to make it. I feel like the game's job is to hook me in a way that I can't put it down, even if I wanted to. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh man, I gotta get sleep, but like, man, this game's so good. I'm gonna play it till 2 a.m. You know, I have to wake up at 7 a.m. I've played those games. You know, I've played many of those games, and those are some of the best games that I've ever played for sure. But you know, if I'm playing a game and I hit a brick wall, or like it's like Scorn, where it just feels like very, very obtuse, and I'm very clearly not in the right headspace, I have no problem just being like, you know what? Either this game is just not for me, this is a game that I don't like, or this is a game that maybe I'll like at another time. I have no problem putting it down and like picking it back up years later, or just being like, you know what, this just wasn't for me. I'm done. I gave it a good try, but you got to hook me, man. And you know, a lot of games do a really good job of that, by the way. I bring up Doom 2016 a lot because it is such a great example of a game that just it doesn't even give you a chance to doubt it. Like, it starts and immediately you're in. You immediately understand why it's cool. You're immediately on a satisfying progression path.
Yeah, don't you beat the shit out of some dudes in a room like they're trying to hold you prisoner?
Immediately. Like, it starts it starts with like some like narration, and you're like, okay, this is kind of, you know, corny world building, whatever. And then you wake up and then you immediately like break a demon's face on a you know, on the edge of a table, and it's like, oh. And then you're playing within like 15 seconds. And it's cool. And you're learning, and it's like, okay, this is very fun. I bring that game up a lot because it's such a masterclass of just like, that game wins you over immediately. Like, even if you're not good at it, even if it's like something that maybe you put down later, you will put your time into that, and it is going to stick out to you. And, you know, a lot of games, just like Monster Hunter World was a great example of a game that kind of did the opposite, where it's like I was just stuck in tutorials for so long that I was just like, in other there, I could name like 50 other games that if I had put this amount of time into, I would have experienced at least a handful of notable story beats by now. Or or multiplayer games where I would have progressed like however many levels and unlocked this many abilities or this many characters. You know, like, I just feel like my patience is really low. I need to have a game that's consistently engaging. I need to have a game that doesn't overstay its welcome and is constantly giving me something that is worth pursuing. And obviously that's a very subjective opinion, but I've put down plenty of games, like after like maybe like an hour or two, sometimes even later. Like, I put about 30 hours into Witcher 3, put it down, and now I'm at a point where I'm just like, I can't go back to that. I don't remember what the hell I was doing, and I'm not about to restart and go back to the 30-hour point. I just don't have that kind of time. It's better time spent playing something that I know is very, very finishable. Something like Callisto Protocol, which I'm so happy is 10 to 12 hours. That's the music to my ears. But yeah, I don't know. I have no problem putting a game down if I'm not enjoying it. Like, that's the whole point of this, you know?
Yeah, I generally agree. The most recent game that I just stopped playing, I have this very unusual thing I do where I play a game deeply and then just stop playing it. I sometimes bounce off of games quickly, but like you were saying, Tunic, for instance, I'm at the last parts of the game and I'm like, I just don't want to play this anymore. It's just not really what I wanted it to be, and I walked away from it. And then sometimes I do that, and I know I'll one day get back to it. That happened with Deathloop, and then I went back to that earlier this year and finally beat it.
Yeah.
And before that, I bounced off of Stray pretty quickly. I was just not feeling Stray at all. But I do try to stick with games. Obviously, I like getting platinum trophies, but when I like a game, I try to see all of it. And so it really just depends. And as we've said ad nauseum on the show, what is obvious from achievement and trophy data is that most people don't beat their games or anywhere close to it.
Yeah.
That's why a game like Elden Ring with an 11% platinum rate is nuts.
It is
that
crazy.
Doesn't even make sense.
I really loved Elden Ring, and I didn't finish it either. I played that was a game too. It's like where I played it very, very deeply for like 100 hours. I put 100 hours into Elden Ring. I loved it. Loved every moment of it. But other things came up, and I'm sure that's another game that I'm going to jump back into at some point, just because I loved it so much. But or Tunic is a good example too. I kind of fell off of it in the same way, not because I wasn't feeling it, but because for whatever reason, I was just entering this headspace where I was like, I want to play stealth stuff. And I don't know why. I'm just like, I have this like itch for like a stealth game, and I want to play one, but there's none out. And then suddenly like, oh, I remember Dishonored 2, and like, oh, Plague Tale. So like once I'm done with these, I'll probably jump in and finish my last bit of Tunic. But I'm very, I don't know, it sounds like, for lack of a better term, I'm like vibe driven. Like sometimes I'll have modes where I'm like, I'm really into an RPG and I want to play an RPG. And then maybe that won't last through the entirety of the RPG. And then I'm just like, I want an action linear game. Maybe or like, what's that Evil West game? Is that the right
that
name?
game looks awesome.
Like, it's like, oh, I'm really into that right now,
Yeah.
And then I'll play
Totally.
something like that. And it's, I don't know. It just, you got to play what strikes you.
I agree. I try to be as patient as I can be, and also just embrace the situation I'm in. I'm very lucky in that I can afford any game I want and play any game I want.
Right.
And I can find the time to do it. So you have to be somewhat intentional in that way. I hope this plays out when people look at my trophies, and I know a lot of people do, is I hope it plays out that I really try to play a diverse array of games. And I think that's just going to become, I think this year was a little stilted because there's just not that much that talks to me, but I think beginning with Tactics Ogre and God of War, and then moving all the way to the spring, I'm going to play so many different kinds of games, from God of War to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 or Final Fantasy 16 or whatever we get, to some fucking visual novel, to some nerdy Japanese role-playing game, and so on and so forth. I love it. I love the wide array of games that are played. I never understood the pigeonholers. I play sports games, I play shooters, I don't play this, I don't play that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Generally speaking, if something's on console, I'll play it. There are really only rare exceptions. Like, I just am really not turned on by CRPGs. I really don't want to play point-and-click adventure games. I'm not smart enough for puzzle games. I'm not fucking good enough for Souls-like games. I know my limitations. But within the shooty, jumpy, slashy realm,
yeah. Okay. I like those too. I want to like CRPGs. You know what I mean? Like, I really like I look at things like Wasteland 3 and like Disco Elysium, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was capable. Because I know there's something really cool here. And maybe one day I will. Maybe one day it'll click, just like Prey clicked, and just like Witcher 3 eventually clicked, and like all these other games eventually do click. But I know that's not right now.
Totally. I think Disco Elysium would be, or I think I bought it already, so I think I own it, but would be the game that I would kind of try, just because I feel like it's non-violent. It can be, or I think is non-violent, and you just play it and read it, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But maybe one day. I just the idea of playing that, though, it's
daunting.
Yeah, it's a turnoff. All right. Ricky Pontes wrote in and said, "Hey, Sacred Boys, I was talking to my brother-in-law about PSVR 2. We got on the topic of how much VR games should cost, and we both don't know what the price point should be or could be. Do you think PlayStation will go for the full $70 AAA game, or will it be a game by game for length and quality? My personal thought is Sony will do the full $70 for first party, while other mediums will have options and price points. But what is acceptable in the cost realm for VR games? Thank you, and hope all three of you are having a fantastic day." Thank you, Ricky, for writing in. Chris, let's stick with you. PSVR first party games. I imagine $70 is no more than that, but I imagine that's going to be the goal. I don't know why you would. You need to make more money per unit on VR games because you're selling so few of them compared to what you would sell of a mainline PS5 game. So I would assume that's safe, right? $70.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Also, I just think they want to be consistent with how they price things going forward, and I just don't think they want to have that conversation of like, hey, well, why is this that and that isn't? I think they want all of their games to be seen as boutique games, and so I do think, yeah, with the exception of like maybe very, very specific free-to-play titles that are obviously not going to cost much of anything, I do think $70 is probably fair. The one thing that I am concerned about, though, is that's a pretty steep asking price just to get in the door. Because you need a console, and then you need a VR headset, and now you're spending $70. You know what I mean? It's like, it's more, it feels a little bit more, I don't want to use the word egregious, but for the lack of a better word, it feels a little bit more egregious than, okay, you buy the $500 console, and then you pay $70 for a game. It's like, okay, well, that's steep still, but like, we get it. But now it's like $500 for the game, $400 potentially for the unit. It's like $970 just to play a fucking. That's $1,000. That's $1,000 basically. That's $1,000 to play one PSVR game, in as your introductory thing. So that I don't know. Maybe I could see maybe them kind of winning people over in the sense that like maybe they could maybe do 60 again for VR titles and still make a lot, because that's still pretty expensive for a VR title. As far as I know, VR titles don't typically cost that much. VR is a very... I don't remember what I paid for Beat Saber, but it wasn't $60, you know? And I don't remember what I paid for Boneworks, but it wasn't $60. It was a lot lower than that. And I think they might have to make more money per game sale. That's true, because the barrier for entry is so high. But at the same time, you don't want to enter a space and shatter the pricing structure to the point where you're just kind of seen as like already behind the competition in a way that's already kind of not really beneficial to you, because the Quest is so approachable and so affordable already. And those games are a lot cheaper to the point where it's like people are going to look at the price points between those two things and they're going to be like, well, what the fuck am I going to buy a PSVR for if I could get, you need good software ultimately. And maybe a first-party Horizon VR game will be worth $70, but I could see that being a difficult sell for an entire subsection of the industry that is so used to paying a little bit less. Although maybe I don't... How much... Dustin, do you remember how much Half-Life Alyx was? I feel like it might have been 60, but I'm not sure.
Half-Life Alyx was $60.
All right.
I was just looking that up.
Yeah. So you got to bring the heat if you're going to charge that then. You know what I mean? Like, you got to compete. Right. It has to be as good as Half-Life Alyx or better. And that might be a stunning amount of confidence out of Sony if they're willing to put that price behind it, but they've got to deliver as well, because the second that Horizon Call of the Mountain comes out and it's not a really great game, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good for the unit. That's not going to be good for PlayStation. It's not going to be good for anybody. It's not good for anybody. It's just not going to be good for the future of that platform if the marker of $70 is an indicator of quality, and now that is no longer trusted. You've got to nail Call of the Mountain hard. And I think they can, but it all depends on that to me.
Dustin, where is your mind on this?
While Chris was talking, I was trying to look up some information just to refresh myself, but it seems like I don't think Sony charged full price for any PSVR game, at least under their first party. I think that their most expensive titles were $40. I may be wrong about that in my quick searching, but I would expect, if I'm predicting, that they will have some titles that will be $70. In fact, I think that there's a strong possibility that the Horizon game will be $70 at launch, now that precedent has especially been set with games like Half-Life Alyx. But again, it's just like Chris said, is that if you charge that $70 price for what's going to be a much... I mean, we talked about quality and length of game, so I don't want to tie those too close, but if you have a shorter VR game, $70, and it's not banging, then that could be a problem for them. So I would expect $70 games and maybe some smaller titles to be 40 or 50, more likely 50. Just because, I don't know, the VR market is really different because the games are different. You know, like you have games like Everybody's Golf VR or something like that, which isn't the type of game that would command a full retail $70 price, but definitely still has a place in the market. So it'll be interesting to see how the VR market adapts. Just think about one of the best sellers of PSVR was Resident Evil 7 VR. And there was no upcharge for that. You just needed to, it's included with Resident Evil 7. So very different time then. So I'm curious, like even with Resident Evil 8 VR, is that going to be an upcharge now? Is that going to be included with the game? They may have said so, but I don't know. I don't think so. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But like I said, $70 for Horizon, I think that seems likely.
Okay. Let's move on here to the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson, who wrote into us. And by the way, DARPA chief, your name on Patreon, chief, is spelt wrong. I before E, except after C, my friend. So I just want you to go ahead and correct that. But I know what you mean. You say DARPA chief Donald Anderson. How's it going, Slitheads? Do you guys think we are in store for a Metal Gear Solid event, like the Silent Hill event that took place last week? There have been multiple rumors about different remakes, remasters, and sequels, as well as the live-action movie that no one asked for, and it seems they could all be true, similar to the Silent Hill rumors before. I think there probably is something Metal Gear Solid going on, and I think that's obvious, actually. I think Sony has something to do with it, too. But I feel like you have to kind of be a little more careful with this. I don't know how they're going to do this. I just don't know how this is done without Kojima, which is why I just have this feeling, even though I'm sure it's not true, but just this idea of Sony acting as the arbiter to just get these two together again. Because Konami doesn't need his blessing or permission to do anything they want with Metal Gear, but there's a certain group of people that will never buy it and never support it. Although I think when they see Metal Gear Solid 2 or Metal Gear Solid 3 remade in Unreal Engine 5 or something, I think most of them will be like, we'll take it. But I just think you got to be a little more careful and you got to message it right. It can't be like the Silent Hill thing where it's just blah, 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 blah. No one really, I know there's guys that are associated with Pyramid Head and all of this, but Silent Hill is not really a auteur-driven series or anything close to that. And Metal Gear Solid is the epitome of that. So I just think they've done one project since he was gone. It was this, they didn't even do any PR for it or anything. No one liked it. Metal Gear Survive. And then that was it. So I don't know. I think it's coming, Dustin, and we'll go to you first. I just don't know that you can do it so easily. And I don't know how you do it without Kojima at all, although I think that it's probably likely that they're going to. Again, I still have this dream, though, that Sony can bridge the gap between these two sides, being very close to both of them for a long time.
Yeah, I'm doubtful that Kojima would be involved in any way. We talked about that interview where he talks about still wanting to be the first to do stuff. And I think that he's just totally in that independent, moved on mindset. As far as an event, I would expect this would be, like you said, Colin, something tied directly to Sony. I think this is something that Sony would want to put in a showcase. Whereas the Silent Hill stuff, as we said last week, feels more like a shotgun approach of a bunch of different projects. And I would hope that Metal Gear would be just one project, one very good project with a very competent team, kind of just to focus all in on that. But yeah, I would think that this would be, like I said, tied for a PlayStation showcase whenever that happens. I don't know when Jim's done crying with the M&A.
He'll never be done.
He'll never be satisfied.
He's never going to be stopping crying. What do you think, Chris? Do you think we're going to see a Silent Hill type Metal Gear event next with Konami as they reemerge and reignite all the different candles that have been long snuffed out?
Not anytime soon. I don't want to say that would never. I don't want to say that won't happen because obviously I think at some point we are due for a Metal Gear Solid event in some way, shape, or form. But I wouldn't expect it any time even remotely soon. I feel like Metal Gear Solid is such a, like you said, such an important thing and such a unique thing that I don't know how you would do it either without Kojima or without a lot of, like, who would be developing this? You know what I mean? Like, who would be
Blue Point.
Yeah, but are they? You know, like
no, I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean?
I just like
I Blue Point would be the people to do it, but
IO Interactive would be the team to do it.
IO Interactive would be interesting, but they're making, what is it? The fucking
Bond.
James Bond.
So like, I just don't know who there is left of any real talent or pedigree to attach to something as pivotally or as important as a Metal Gear Solid remake. And even just beyond that, it's like there's so many little things. Like, how do you do the player 2 thing? Like, those are littler things that can obviously be like worked around with like enough creativity. But like, I just feel like this is one you don't want to fuck up, and because of that, I feel like we're way further away from it than I think we'd like to be. Granted, we've been hearing these rumors for a long time, but I don't know. I think we're still a ways away from hearing anything about Metal Gear Solid in any remake capacity, or they're not going to continue it. You know, I feel like the clear path is remakes, right? Because those are safe. It's like, hey, because you could get away with being like, hey, well, this is still Kojima's vision. You know what I mean? We're just updating it. You know, we're just bringing it into the modern era. So I feel like that's a lot of people would be a little bit more forgiving of that, because like, all right, well, you know, those games are kind of locked away, and you know, it would be cool to have those. They're an important piece of history. Okay, you know, we don't appreciate what happened with Kojima and all that, but you know, we'll take a modern Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3. But you're not gonna get. I don't think you're gonna see a new Metal Gear Solid. You know, like Metal Gear Solid 6. I don't think that's real, because I think that would be a fucking catastrophe.
Either. No, I don't think that's real either. No way.
Yeah.
I also think there might be some sort of problem courting talent to work on Metal Gear games, especially in Japan, knowing that might be consequential to one of the most important Japanese game dev employers right now in the last 5 years, a team that's expanding not only in Japan but around the world in Kojima's own enterprise. So there's a lot of strange things that I think have to go into the determination of when it's time. But I think you're right that calling it Metal Gear X, whatever X would be, and starting a new series would be, I think, the only way forward outside of remaking the old games. And then just saying we're telling a different geopolitical story. It's totally different. We have Metal Gear, we have Metal Gear Solid, we have Metal Gear Rising, we have, you know, whatever the case, I don't know.
Yeah.
Metal Gear Acid and all this random shit they did. So this is just another one of those. They might be able to get away with it. They're certainly going to try. I think they'd be stupid not to. I just think it's the easiest thing is to capitulate and deal with Kojima himself. All right. These next three, as I was putting this show together, I realized these are kind of interconnected, so we'll take them one at a time. I can take this first one though myself. KBR Sports wrote in and said, "Good day, my guys. This is more a question for Colin, but anyone can answer. Can you explain the business of video games in terms of funding, then the different sectors of staff needed to make a game? How can you tell the difference in budgets for a game like Far Cry 6 versus Hades? I've never known where the staffing focus is in gaming, whether it's engineering, artists, etc. During the Hassan interview, Colin asked how many people he had working on his game, and he said he could ballpark the game budget based on the staff size. Just curious of what math you utilized to figure those things out. Thanks for reading and stay blessed." So the best way to do this, in my estimation, is, first of all, I'm very conservative in the way I determine these numbers, and you can just do things in a sort of consistent way. What I look at with like a AAA game is just head count multiplied by $100,000 multiplied by year. And then that's how much the base game would cost before marketing, before all of your external development, your production, all of the rest, printing, PR and management, facilities, all of the rest. So you have 100-person team working at $100,000 a person. That's a $10 million staff, right? And that would be compounded per year based on your headcount. And this is how games get extraordinarily expensive, because now you have teams of 500 people. They're not making $100,000 a year. I mean, that would be a nice amount of money, but usually making actually more than that. And then you have all of the, like, what is your IT cost? What is your bandwidth cost? If you're in an office, how much of that is divided by the amount of people that work there? Like, there's all these things that go into how games are priced, but it gives us a general view of how the different strata of games. And also geography is important too. I brought up Control earlier, and that was made in Europe for really cheap, like 30 million euros. I don't know how they did that. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they're not really counting the facility and all the things that were built in from their other games that had already existed. But that's generally how I figure out how much games cost. And so when you see something like Hades, that's Supergiant's 20 people. So you can assume that their costs are several $1 million a year probably to keep their people fed and happy, plus all of the costs on top of that. And the difference between that and Far Cry 6 that probably had 1,000 people working on it all around the world is wildly different. But then you have kind of mysterious math because the people in Ubisoft Pune are not making the same as the people in Ubisoft Montreal. And so there's all that too. So it's all guesswork. But rest assured, and again, my numbers are conservative. Rest assured, games costing $100 million plus are very, very, very common now. And they were basically unheard of. I think I said on the last episode that Final Fantasy VII, when it was in production in the mid-90s, cost $50 million, and that was considered obscene. Like completely obscene, unnecessary amount of money to spend on a video game. And 3 or 4 years, people were like, this is preposterous.
Well, how does that work out? Is that inflation accounted for, or is that like...
No, that's $50 million for them, so it would be more like $100 million today.
Yeah, so...
But the point is that's pretty mid-budget for AAA.
Yeah, you're right.
The next Naughty Dog game is going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars from stem to stern, So it's just... So it's KBR, to answer your question, it's a lot of it is just guesswork, but also talking to people behind the scenes, also just doing the math yourself. It's the same reason why when I talk about Game Pass and I'm like, I don't care what they say, the math just doesn't make any sense. It's because you can just do the math yourself. Look, I even have a little fucking, like I said last week, a calculator. Here, I'm ready to go. So you can start to kind of formulate things. And then when you learn concrete, detailed information, you can kind of take that on board. For instance, Control's budget showed me that you can really get a game in pretty cheap in a low-end AAA way. I don't think Control is by any means a AAA game, but it's great. Yeah. And so that's the answer to that. Now, the next one is from Vanarin, who wrote in and said, hey, CDC, are 5-year dev cycles a permanent fixture for the games industry or a temporary side effect from the pandemic that's causing devs to limp now until they can sprint back to the 3-year dev cycle? How can developers be satisfied in an industry where a product takes half a decade to create? Plus, won't this create the cost of production, increase the cost of production? Business and art are inherent to games, and both scales seem overtipped in this scenario. Furthermore, 5 years will cause more games to miss the zeitgeist and come out perhaps a little too late or too similar to something like Days Gone when the zombie genre had become oversaturated. Perhaps all this is an industry management issue that other teams must prove otherwise, like how Team Asobo recently managed to pull off a Plague Tale Requiem in 3 years. But see, with a Plague Tale, I pointed out, not having played it, I'm sure it's great, but it, by virtue of just being locked at 30 frames to me, says that that's an undercooked game. I mean, I don't care about the rat physics. It's just... I don't know if that's I don't know if a 5 year. So you're going to tell me that the game would have come out the same if they took 5 years to make it?
I think they made a decision early on in development when looking at the hardware to design it around 30 FPS. I don't think it has anything to do with optimization, personally.
Yeah.
Do you think? Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, we've all been in this for a while. We've all played undercooked games. Having played it, I don't feel like it's undercooked. I just feel like there's something off of it. Like, it doesn't feel like it's... I don't know how to describe it. I think Dustin's probably right in the sense that it's probably like an early design decision. And like I said, like I think, or maybe they even just kind of went about it with like, by the time, we'll get this out, it'll be playable, and in like less than a year's time, PCs will catch up to it, and then it'll be like, I feel like maybe they're thinking about it in as far as like a future proofing situation where it's like, yeah, in the short term, it'll be like a little wonky, but we don't even need it. I don't think it needs to even really be patched. I just think it needs to run on newer hardware, which maybe they were kind of betting on. I'm not sure, but I do think a lot of this is managerial, man. Like, there's no reason. I mean, I don't want to hijack the question from you, but I feel like 5 years is crazy for games. And I know that that's like the new standard now, but like, there's no way developers are happy in comparison, like working on the same thing for 5 years. And if you make 2 games, that's 10 years. You can tell me people are like really satisfied, like beyond happy to be working on, putting beads of sweat on Kratos' face for 10 years. Like, I mean,
no,
like,
but I think you said it. I think a lot of it is managerial in the sense that I think 5 years is a perfectly fine time to incubate a great game. I just think you have to have a team of fluidity, which I think is what Haven might be working on, where it's like your team is constantly moving. There are a series of projects in development, and you are doing what you're supposed to be doing for that project before moving on to do what you're supposed to do for the next project, and so on and so forth. So though it takes these 5 years, you could conceivably work on multiple games at once as the gray box designers are going around and making all the designs for the new game. You're taking their designs and implementing it into geometry in the next game, and then the game above that has already been done, and now they're putting the fine texture. You know what I mean? It's a little bit assembly line-ish, but I do think that is the key to keeping things fresh, and why when I look at, I actually brought it up, when I look at the Gone Gold thing from Santa Monica Studio, it's got 9 studios on it. The 9 studio logos. Not only Santa Monica Studio, but Creative Arts, Valkyrie, Bluepoint, Red Hot, Super Alloy, Jetpack, Super Genius, and Original Force all worked on this game. So I feel like if you're willing to spread the work out, you can make these games even quicker. It's just a matter of control and cost. I wonder how much each of those contracts cost if they own some of those studios too, but I don't know. So I agree with you, but I think so instead of like, I don't look at it as a static, like we should be working on one project as a unit for 5 years. That I think is not going to work.
Yeah.
And that is the way it works right now for a lot of teams. And I don't think it's sometimes, they split off, have little skunk work teams that are working on the next game, but people really do stay in the trenches for years. And I just think that is a managerial and system pipeline sort of issue where you should have creative forces always moving products forward and draw from these different teams. It would almost make sense. I don't think this is the way you would want to make a video game per se, but it's like studio musicians, right? And sometimes studio musicians like Toto, the band Toto, were all studio musicians that met through that or whatever and became a band. And it's like, do you want to kind of maybe, is the idea to maybe split all this stuff up? So you have, instead of having a video game studio, you have a design studio or a series of studios that design games. You have a series of studios that animate games. You have a series of studios that write games or whatever the case might be. And you put them all together in different permutations so that they're all working on different things. I don't know what the future looks like, but that might keep things fresh too. Because I would agree that would be creatively stymied or stymieing, although I'm very sure they're impressed with the bonuses they get at the end of making a game like God of War. So
yeah,
there's that as well. Dustin, do you have anything you want to add?
I just, the only thing I'll add is I'm curious as new development tools are coming out, particularly Unreal Engine 5. One of the big selling points is that supposed to be easier. It's supposed to make asset development easier. And that's probably one of the big things moving forward, is not just figuring out how to optimize these insanely large teams, but also optimizing your tool set in order to make games easier to make. So you have to imagine that's part of it. And that's probably, like you said, with Haven, part of their flow as well. Support teams figuring out how to get these tools to work with you and not against you, because we've seen teams like particularly Bungie with Destiny 1. That was one of the, at least things that they've said was a huge problem with making new content for that game. Is just the tools that they built it around made it very, very difficult. And so that's just another consideration in this process.
That game was in development since like 2008. So
yeah,
it's interesting to think that in some way we hear about visual arts, for instance, the visual arts group, which are visual arts groups, so animation, mocap, and all of that, almost, but they don't, for instance, write the games or design them or anything like that. And it is interesting to think about splitting up your resources like that. And in some way, in other words, having a brain trust. I think it's kind of what they do with the MCU and stuff like that, and other Star Wars, where you have like a brain trust of people that are the arbiters of all of it. The lore, and you have that with studio heads and stuff, but what I'm saying is like the lore, all of the ideas, everything just flows through these people, and then they dispatch these ideas. And I wonder if I feel like that's a little creatively bankrupt, but it does take care of that. What are you doing for 5 years as the animator on this game? It's not necessary for you to animate this game for 5 years, so you must need to do something else. Okay. The final inquiry is from Papa Flo. He says, greetings, Slitherheads. With the current state of how poorly games launch, do you think anything could happen in the industry that would precipitate a return to games launching smoothly? Or with the advent of developers being able to patch their creations, are we doomed to experience dogshit launch days for eternity? I wanted to ask you guys this just on the back of Overwatch 2, which we discussed a little bit, and it's worth noting that they were at least partially subjected to a DDoS attack, which can't really do much about. I mean, they can protect against it better, but so it wasn't all them not being prepared. But mixed up in all of this commentary about time and money is the fact that nothing seems to be good enough, even though we are giving you more time and more money, if that makes sense. The games are great and we love playing them, but why are they never the way they're supposed to be when they launch?
Yeah.
That I don't really quite understand that. Apart from products are never done, you go gold and then you just want to keep working on something, and I get that, but it's become a joke almost the way games are launched. And then you see a game like Saints Row and it sells all these copies where it's the 15th best-selling game in the United States for the year already. But then you get this diatribe from the developer going on about how they're going to fix everything. And it's like, well, what the fuck did everyone just play then? I don't understand that. And that's bothersome.
Yeah.
And I don't think, Chris, we're ever going to go back.
No, yeah, I think we're doomed to this, unfortunately. Like, it's really depressing. I was having this conversation a couple days ago with a friend of mine. We were just talking about, like, because I often try to reconcile. Like, I'm a very self-aware person to like a detrimental degree, right? Now, so anytime I'm feeling like, man, things suck now, I always try to look in the mirror a little bit and say, like, no, it's not necessarily that. It's probably, I'm getting older. Right. So things aren't as new to me anymore. There's less magic around video games in general. Like, I'm sure there were plenty of broken games that used to come out when I was a kid. Right. But then part of me has to be like, I'm not just making it up that nearly every release is like this. And it didn't used to be that way. Like, at least not in the ways that they're broken. Like Overwatch 2,
it just couldn't be that way.
It could not be. Like in the 90s, you had a lot of games that were kind of busted for years. Like, I get that. But there was at least some idea that things were getting better over time. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, okay, the 90s was a little jank. 2000s, we started to see like a bit more quality. But then like early 2010s, it's just been this constant downturn of like Overwatch launched. The original Overwatch launched pretty fine. Like they had a loot box controversy, which is not necessarily a broken game situation. That's just like a controversial monetization scheme, which is like, fair enough. That's a huge problem in the industry now too. But Overwatch 2 launched, and yeah, aside from the DDoS attack, still I saw a video of this guy playing, and every time he unlocked an achievement, it disconnected him from the game and it pushed him into the queue behind 30,000 other people. That would not have happened however many years ago. That didn't happen with the multiplayer games that were coming out in like the late 2000s. Or the early 2010s, that just wasn't happening. Halo Infinite would have died on the day if it had come out in 2007. Like, this is so... Like, the lack of quality that we expect out of first party, or even just, like, big AAA games at launch is so low now that, like, it's difficult to even get excited about things anymore. And I try to, again, like, I try to reflect as like, am I being too jaded? And it's like, I don't think I am. I don't think this is in my head. Things are just worse because now we have this complacency culture of like, oh, we'll just patch it. And it's done nothing but ruin a lot of aspects of this industry for me. Like to the point where like a lot of times, like I can really only rely on indie games to function, And that's crazy. Because how are you making all this money? How are you spending all this money? And your game doesn't work. And people are like, oh, games used to be a little bit broken too. Halo 2 was famously buggy and glitchy. And it's like, no, buggy and glitchy is one thing, right? It's another thing to have your game crash constantly. It's another thing to have your online multiplayer not work for months. It's another thing to have, just core functionality, like your ability to play the game, period, is being impeded because you didn't design it right. Like, that's different than the bugs we used to get. We used to get, like, you know, like Halo 2 was like, oh, you could break out of the map. Okay. That's not the same.
Yeah, I think patching has, I mean, it's obviously been a boon and it's vital and it's awesome, but it's just been used as a tool. And sadly, Dustin, the only way to combat this is stop buying games at launch. And I don't necessarily blame anyone for not buying anything at launch. I don't really feel like if you can go without being part of the conversation, in quotes, and part of the zeitgeist, and have a little bit of patience. And a lot of people, I think, just by virtue of having real lives and families and jobs, they're just like so far behind on everything anyway. Why not wait and teach these companies a lesson in the meantime? Get the game for 10 or 20 bucks and they basically made nothing on you, and you get to play the game anyway, and it sends the message that maybe you should create a more cogent experience out the gate. And then, of course, on the other hand, when a game does come out and it does work and it's in good shape, reward that game as well. But too many people are just so eager to pre-order and put things down without even sight unseen. I just think it's a huge mistake, and a lot of it is on the consumer, because the chase is on the money, and that's it.
Yeah. The thing, though, is that we used to be able to do that. You know, and you'd get something that was pretty high quality. Even if you didn't like what you got, you know, even if you were just like, this isn't for me. Generally speaking, back in the day, I don't remember regretting pre-ordering anything. Granted, that could be because I was a kid, but there was not at any point that I came home with a AAA game that was just broken to the point where I couldn't finish it, or that like the core functionality of it was just completely like upended in a way that just didn't function. I could be just patching these things out of my own memory, but like, I swear this was just not common to this degree. I think it's because, you know, games back then had to at least run. Now they don't even have to at least run. That's crazy. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's
I feel like it's important for us, or gamers will say, as a community, that we need to get better at reading the writing on the wall, because a lot of times these games that come out broken, the writing is indeed on the wall. When previews and reviews of Cyberpunk came out and they were only on PC, that should have raised some red flags.
Suspicious.
When the betas for Fallout 76 were fucking horrible, maybe should have raised some red flags.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
even less obvious things, like to me Anthem and No Man's Sky were obvious. You know what I mean? Like those, like when No Man's Sky was shown for 4 years in a row at E3 and it was the same exact demo, like every single time, I remember being like, what the is this is not going to be good. And everybody was like, nah, man, you don't understand what they're doing. And then it was crashing on day one. And it was like, it didn't have the multiplayer that they said was in it. What a hilarious situation. And then Anthem was obvious. And yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, even to a lesser extent, man, like the second I saw Gotham Knights, man, I knew something was up. I didn't know what was up, but like something was tingling, you know, like I felt something. I was like, something's up about this. I don't know what it is. And lo and behold, you know, it's you know, it's, I don't know. I think though that we are spoiled from being involved in this industry for a long time, that we've developed this kind of almost like, I don't want to call it a sixth sense because it's a little pretentious, but like I do think it's like, you develop some kind of understanding of like, you recognize red flags, even if you're not necessarily 100% conscious of it. You just like, something about this doesn't sit right.
And I think it's important, Colin, you mentioned about waiting, and I think you're correct, but the only thing I would add to that is that you don't even necessarily really have to wait long term. In some situations, if you wait till later in the day on launch day, sometimes that's enough. If I would have waited till later in the day, when the day Halo Master Chief Collection came out, I would have known not to buy it. If I would have waited till later in the day when Assassin's Creed Unity came out, I would have known not to buy it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times these like the major issues are very obvious from the very beginning. Like with Overwatch too, that's the same thing. Which I guess that's a free to play, so it's not quite the same thing. But it's like I was curious about that game when it was coming out, and I thought I'm going to wait till a little later on to see if it's worth me trying to spend my time trying to get in and play it. It was immediately obvious. Fallout 76, the day that came out, all you had to do was look online or check out what some YouTubers were saying. That's all you need. You don't necessarily need to wait a long time. And at that point, then you can make the decision, is it working and good? Go for it. Maybe you want to play on launch, and now you can spend your money safely.
Yeah.
Or at that point, maybe the right decision is to wait until it works. Because there is certain situations where games do turn it around. Cyberpunk.
That's true.
No Man's Sky, stuff like that. And then you can play a version of the game that actually fucking works.
Yeah,
and is fun to play.
Years later.
And you probably will spend way less on it.
Whoa, I only have to wait 6 years for the Master Chief Collection to work? Sick.
Sick. I know. Outrageous. Well, interesting conversations nonetheless, as our episode of Sacred Symbols comes to a close. Time to go now. Chris, you have any closing comments?
No, I had something in the beginning of the episode that I was like, oh, I'm gonna end on that, and then I forgot. So that's how my brain is doing. If you were
it was
curious.
a long time ago. Don't worry about it. It was a long time ago. Dustin, closing comments.
I said this at the end of the last episode, but I want to repeat it for the wider audience. Thank you guys so much for supporting our new merch. You know, I see the receipts come into my email. Some of you are spending a lot of money with us, and it's not lost on us at all. It's very much appreciated. As you guys are getting your merch this week, whether it's a hat or a hoodie, take a pic, post it online, tag me in it, or tag Last Stand. I love seeing that stuff roll in and seeing people just happy with the stuff they bought. So we appreciate it. Shout out to Micah, of course, who is shipping all of this stuff out. I'm just imagining on that first day, I mean, hoodies are big. They take up a lot of space. So I'm imagining Micah filling up her car with all of these orders of hoodies. I'm sure that was no small feat. So
yeah, she's been going back and forth to the post office and she's working hard. She's doing a great job. So yeah, we appreciate everyone's support out there. It's a great way to support us at laststandmedia.store if you're interested in more of that. And,
we're almost out of black hats, but there's more coming. If you see that they're sold out, I already have another order in, but there is plenty of blue left.
Yes. So thank you for your love, kindness, and support of all those things over there. All things on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, on YouTube and all the rest. I'd like to ask again if you guys could leave us nice reviews on iTunes, Spotify, and all those other podcast services. It would be very helpful. You can follow us on YouTube and thumb up the videos and all that if you'd like, but that would be helpful for us now. And of course, supporting us on Patreon is great. Patreon.com/laststandmedia if you'd like early ad-free access and Sacred Symbols Plus and all the rest. But we'll see you next time for more Sacred Symbols. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.